Where can I see the comments?
I don't know yet.
Oh, okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm Captain Logan, and this is Dan Torrey.
Hello, friends.
And we are attempting to go live via a different source. Usually we use Google Hangouts. Today we are attempting to do this with OBS. We were supposed to have a Captain Logan show earlier this evening that Dan was also going to be on, and that didn't work out because Hangouts were broken. An hour and a half later, I have downloaded OBS, and I am trying to work with this software. And, oh boy, there's folks here already, Dan, so it's working.
Oh, cool.
Isn't that great?
How can I see these people?
Well, I can see them because I have the fancy OBS software, but I'm going to find the link to you and send it to you. Because we weren't able to schedule this ahead of time for myriad uninteresting reasons, and so I will have to go find that for you. So everybody, bear with me for just a couple of minutes here, and we'll get the movie started in just a little bit. Everybody that's listening right now, would somebody just let us know if we sound pretty good, if you can hear Dan, if I'm echoing or anything like that? Because I don't really have any way on my end to know what it sounds like right now.
Hopefully we don't sound like garbage.
Yes, Thomas Edghill, this will theoretically be the commentary. Assuming we can get in there. Jeffrey says the audio is good, and you guys can hear Dan? Because I see him in my levels. But oh, good, everybody can hear us. And no echo. Cool.
All right, let's pop this chat out here. Boom.
Oh, did you find it?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
It says Geek Pollution Test live stream, so I don't know.
Oh, that shouldn't be it unless you can actually see them. It should say Into the Spider-Verse commentary.
Oh, on my screen on subscriptions, it still says Geek Pollution Test live stream.
Does it?
And then
really?
I see.
Oh, that would
so
explain
the one
why.
People are commenting on is the test live stream, and that's what we're streaming from right now. And then there's a scheduled Into the Spider-Verse thing.
That's weird. Okay, hold on. I'll try to fix it. Everybody, just give me a minute. The title is Test Live Stream. That's why everyone's confused. Okay, I'm fixing it right now. I see that, and we'll fix it. Give me a second. Dan, entertain everyone for a moment.
All right. I will be everyone's dancing monkey for the foreseeable future. How's everybody doing? Guys living good lives and doing some cool stuff. I hope, anyway. Hello, John Ty. I hope everyone's excited as we are to watch this this movie. I quite liked watching this one in the movie theater.
I'm still entirely expecting something to go wrong. We're assuming we're watching this movie. I think we're gonna watch this movie. I really do. Okay, so I typed in a new thing, but I don't actually know if it changed or not. Oh, it says that the changes are saved. Okay. You know what my favorite thing about this is? This actually kind of warms my heart. We had 12 people here before they even knew why they were here.
Yeah.
Like, that's amazing.
I think we have the best audience of all time.
We really do.
Thomas Edghill, no, I'm not from Brooklyn. What you hear in my voice is I am from the Boston area. So I'm a New Englander. I have a slight Boston accent because my parents are both from Massachusetts, even though I grew up in New Hampshire and have lived there for most of my life. I have inherited some of their Bostonian ways of speaking. So, yeah, kid. Okay,
so folks, let me know if the title is right now, if people aren't just clicking on test live stream. And I'm pretty sure I fixed it. So yeah, I think we're good. I think we're close to getting ready to get started, Dan. We're gonna watch some Into the Spider-Verse.
Let's get into it.
And we got to start real quick. I got to be here in a couple hours, and this movie is 1 hour and 55 minutes long, so we're going to have to get rolling. But once again, thanks everybody for being here, and sorry for the delay. Sorry the Captain Logan show didn't happen earlier. We are going to reconvene for the Captain Logan show on Friday night. DJ is going to join me for that. And Dan, you're welcome, but I'm sure you're busy.
This Friday night. Yes, I will not be around, unfortunately.
No problem. Maybe you can make it on another Wednesday.
Maybe. We shall see.
Yeah, hopefully so. Well, but I'm glad that you're here for this, and I'm glad we get to do this. Dan, did you see my pictures on Facebook recently? All the crazy monitor setup that I have, where I've got like 5 monitors now. Yeah, and I'm needing almost every one of them tonight. Oh
God, that sounds like a nightmare.
I've got so much going on right now. Really glad I set that up. I'm being somewhat hyperbolic. I'm not using all of them, but yeah.
Yeah, but still.
Yeah, I'm using at least 3. Okay, are you guys ready to get started?
I'm ready to get started.
So, Dan, Into the Spider-Verse, you and I did a spoiler cast for this. We talked a whole bunch about it. We're going to talk some more about it tonight. How many times have you seen it now?
I rewatched it once. I rented it on Amazon after it went on digital release, and liked it even more the second time I saw it. So this will be the 3rd time I've seen the film now.
Yeah, I think my feelings have more or less remained the same. I've seen it 3 times, and I showed it to my wife and family a couple weeks ago, and Sarah loved it, and she's not a Spider-Man person, so that's saying a lot. I think it's her favorite Spider-Man movie now. And she liked Homecoming also, but I think this was more of her bag.
Yeah, this is my favorite superhero movie come out in a while, I think, because a lot of the recent ones I've thought were mediocre to bad, so this was a pleasant surprise. I didn't really expect much from this.
Oh, come on, you know you love Venom. You know Venom was the best thing.
It was really bad, but I loved it because of how bad it was.
That was the most fun I've had with a commentary in quite a while.
Yeah, it's not like Endgame where I went and saw it and I was like, oh, this is really mediocre. I'm not really enjoying watching this. Venom was like, oh, I'm not enjoying watching this so much. This is hilarious. Like, this is just terrible.
Well, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. If you want to make sure that your comment gets read, if you're watching live, you can leave a super chat. We sure appreciate folks who do that and support the channel. Whatever you want to give, $1, $5, whatever it is, we'll make sure that we answer your question and talk to you. But we'll also talk to you guys regardless. We just won't hit every comment, but we'll be responding to comments as we go. Just answering questions and addressing your ideas and concerns about the film, and we will of course be providing our own commentary on top of that. If you want to watch with us, and we encourage you to do that, if you're watching live, you can go to the Rabbit Room right now, which is in the description, and you should also be able to see there in your window, because I'm doing the fancy OBS thing, so I can actually give you information on the screen. It's very exciting. And if you're watching after the fact, of course, you're going to need to get out your DVD, your Blu-ray, your digital copy, however you want to watch it, get it to timestamp 0, and in a month from now, Dan, people will be able to watch this on Netflix, but I didn't want to wait that long.
Oh, it's coming out on Netflix in a month? That's great. I'll probably watch it a couple more times when it goes on there. That's good news.
So let's go ahead and get into it. Everybody get ready to press play when I say now, and I'm going to do that real soon. Everybody please press play. Dan, can you see the Rabbit Room?
I can see the Rabbit Room.
You got it there? Sweet. All right, here we go. Everybody please press play right now. Dan, this is exciting. I really did not think that I would be actually watching this movie tonight after the hour and a half of insanity that has ensued.
It is a pleasant surprise. Here's the audio for the movie. I don't seem to be able to hear the audio for the film at all in the Rabbit Room.
It's just real quiet right now. You should be able to hear pretty soon.
Oh, I remember there being like
I've got
loud noises at this part.
Are you not hearing it at all?
No, it's completely muted for me.
I'm not sure why, because I've got audio on my end. I'll check the Rabbit Room and see if there's a. Of course, there is, everything's got to break down on this again. Naturally.
Yeah, I put the little volume thing all the way up on the Rabbit Room on my end, and I can't hear anything.
You still got nothing?
Nothing at all.
Well, and you're sure it's not something on your end?
I mean, it could be. I've put all the volume things up on my laptop, on the Rabbit Room thing, on my headphones.
Okay, because other people are able to hear the audio in the Rabbit Room.
Weird.
I'm pretty sure you know.
I mean, I can give you guys a silent commentary of the movie if you want.
Save the city. And then I say the city again.
So Dan, hopefully you can get your audio thing figured out, but we'll start talking about the movie. Did you like what we did with this at the beginning, where this sort of feels like Raimi Spider-Man? Because I kind of wanted them to go all the way with that, where like this is the future of Raimi Spider-Man, and when he does the emo thing and he's not in the flat costume, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess it's not that, but it's almost that.
Yeah, I liked the cute little references to all of Spider-Man's history in general at the beginning here, with the comic book stuff and even the ice cream pops. Like, I remember buying those from ice cream trucks when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And they weren't good. But he's right about that.
It's really funny when he calls them mediocre, whatever he says, yeah.
Yeah.
It's great.
So I can't figure out how to do this, so I guess I'm just going to have to go reading the subtitles here. And
oh, I'm sorry, man.
Yeah.
Well, do you want me to start over? Do you want to try to figure it out?
I mean, I don't know what I can possibly do. There's, like, nothing that I haven't tried, so I guess we'll have to go forward,
well,
I suppose.
I feel bad about that. I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, me either. I don't know. Maybe it's a Skype thing. Maybe it's Skype mutes the audio from all of their stuff except for your call or something.
I don't understand, man. Well, anyway, this is not an interesting commentary to anybody now. Guys, we're gonna try this again, I think. Dan, why don't you try to reset the rabbit room?
How do I do that?
Just refresh it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry guys, I just hate for Dan to not be able to hear this at all while we're trying to talk about it.
Alright, I reset the rabbit room.
Okay, let me do some playback here and tell me if you can hear it. Hold on.
I can hear it now.
Oh, sweet. Okay, yeah. So next time, just refresh it.
Oh, okay. Weird. I don't know why. That's super weird. Sorry about that, guys.
No, that's all right. So, guys, we'll try this one more time, and I will later on just download this audio and do some editing and repost it for everybody watching after the fact. But thanks for your patience, everybody. And hey, Dan, let's start again and have a proper commentary. You ready?
Okay, yeah.
All right, here we go. Everybody, please press play right now.
All right, yeah, I can definitely hear it now. This is good.
So, Dan, this is the first time that the Sony logo has popped up for a Spider-Man movie, and I'm like, good job, you guys. You guys...
Yeah.
I mean, not the first time. Obviously, I like stuff about the other movies, but, like, they finally really, really nailed one.
I mean, I don't know. I like the first two Raimi films and the first Amazing one a lot. But this is probably... It's up there with my favorites, so...
Yeah, I mean, I still got a place for Spider-Man 1 and 2. I don't think they hold up as well as I used to think they did, and obviously you and I like Amazing more than most people on the planet, but it's got not a great villain plot and kind of a weak third act in places, but this is the first thing they've made that I felt was real quintessential Spider-Man, and I also just appreciate integrating so much comic stuff and this team, like, getting all that stuff. It's also nuts all the things that we just made mainstream that I never thought we would. This is a very Guardian situation where, like, now everyone knows what Spider-Ham is. Spider-Ham was in a movie that won an Oscar.
Yeah, that's actually pretty funny. And thankfully, this was a better movie than Guardians, too, so I'm really happy about that.
Well, I like Guardians a lot.
Oh, that's fair. I couldn't care less.
Well, that's fine, man, but I gave that movie a 4. I've got a lot of nice things to say about Guardians. I don't like the sequel as well,
you know?
But, yeah.
I saved a bunch of people, fell in love,
so,
saved the city.
do you think it's,
again and again.
Do you think it's sort of weird that they went with a different voice actor for the Spider-Man at the beginning versus the one that's in the rest of the movie?
Yeah, just because usually, especially with animated things, we traditionally don't do that.
Yeah.
I'm of two minds about it, because it would have been really cool to have one actor that was able to modulate so much you almost couldn't tell it was him. On the other hand, it was kind of worth it for the performances that we got.
I mean, who wouldn't?
Because the noir choice is inspired.
Oh, I don't mind them using different voices for the other versions that are very different. I just thought it was an interesting choice to take, like, Peter Parker and, like quintessential Peter Parker here, and then, like, the out-of-shape one have different voices. You know what I mean?
I like that to be consistent if we're gonna not have one guy do all the voices.
Right,
because they're mostly all still Peter Parkers.
And they're all great, too.
Yeah, they're all great. But yeah, Nicolas Cage is a genius choice. I had to see this twice before I realized that was Chris Pine. It blew my mind.
Me too. I didn't realize it was him until I looked at the credits, like, after I saw the film and everything.
And then when I started really listening to it, I was like, oh, I'm dumb. I should have picked that up, because I've seen enough Chris Pine stuff now that like I could pick up his mannerisms and stuff, and I was like, oh yes, of course, that's Chris Pine.
So Miles Morales in this movie, I think they add some very cool aspects to his character that weren't present in the comics, like the interest in art and like spray painting and all of that stuff. Like, I don't remember that being a part of his character in the comics. Maybe I'm wrong, because I haven't read that stuff in a while.
It wasn't unless they add it later, but it certainly doesn't start there. And this is, interestingly, very much a reinvention of his origin, but keeping all the core stuff from the origin there. Mm-hmm. And I really didn't expect it to be as faithful to the Ultimate stuff as it was. It's really impressive how all that's integrated. Yeah,
and I think, for whatever reason, the Miles in this movie has a little bit more of a personality to me than the one at the beginning, at least, of Bendis' run.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe it's just that stuff moves so slow that I was getting bored. I don't know.
Well, yeah, he's pretty decompressed. Yeah. Miles is, I think the important core stuff is still, of course, at the center of his character, yes. But it is nice to give him real specific interests, and he feels more like, I want to say he feels more like a typical teenager in this, in the right kind of ways. Introducing him listening to music and pretending like he knows the words, that's a very teenager thing to do.
Yeah. I like that he sort of has a complex in this movie about going to this kind of elite, upscale school for kids that are very intelligent and stuff. He, at the beginning of this movie, seems to be much more interested in hanging out with the people in his neighborhood and stuff like that, which I don't remember being present in the comics either. I remember, like, in the first issue that he, the first issue of Ultimate Comics, Miles Morales Spider-Man, or whatever the title of it was back then, he just kind of, like, gets in the lottery and they're very happy about it, and then they move forward from there. I like that that's, like...
Yeah, it's very Harry Potter in that way.
Yeah.
He put on the sorting hat, and then...
Yeah. I like for here, in this, it's something that, tells you something about his character. Because it relates to, how he looks up to his uncle, Aaron, and how he's a bit more of a streetwise kind of guy when compared to his father and stuff like that.
I also like this version, unlike the comics version, is a lot like Peter Parker in certain ways and kind of his opposite in other ways. And that's not to say that he's just straight up another version of Peter Parker in the comics. And importantly, he's got to be his own person, or it's weird that this universe has two Spider-Mans. Like, he could just be another alternate Spider-Man where it's like, he's not Peter Parker, but he's basically Peter Parker. He just looks different. He has a different name.
Right.
But, like, in the comics, if memory serves at the beginning, he's about as nerdy and almost outcasty, like, original early Peter Parker is. And this version of Miles, like, everybody gets along with. He's slapping high fives going down the street. Everybody knows his name. But he's still insecure in the ways that teenagers tend to be insecure. And so he can be easily embarrassed, but he's a little bit more outgoing and a little bit more comfortable in his own skin. And it's cool to see a Spider-Man that has that.
Well, and I think it's interesting, right? Like, Peter Parker doesn't fit in at his high school because he's a nerd, and Miles Morales doesn't fit in well at this school because he's kind of less nerdy than the rest of the people.
Oh, that's a good point, too, yeah.
He's a little bit more outgoing and social, like you said.
Yeah,
you know?
He's comfortable in his own neighborhood, but not as
Right.
much at this school, even though he deserves to be here.
Exactly.
I like the Great Expectations reference just because it's a little, I don't even want to say foreshadowy. It has to do with the themes of this film, because he thinks he's expecting certain things to happen for him. He's expecting other things to go wrong. He's certainly not expecting Spider-Man to happen. As soon as I see that title, I think, okay, what are the things that this character thinks are going to happen for him versus what actually do?
I didn't realize in the background here of this scene, in the footage of the teacher, it says Alchemax head scientist and Dr. Olivia something. You don't see her last name, but it's a little clue there. That's cool.
Yeah, that is cool. I remember she was there, but I didn't remember they showed her name. And I thought the first clue we got to Alchemax was the spider. That's neat. Next time I watch this, I'm going to see if it's even before that, and we didn't notice it. It's actually in the opening credits, and we just didn't see it. It's right at the very beginning.
I love Gwen Stacy in this movie, too. She's fantastic. We'll get into more as we see more of her, I suppose, but I love her in this movie.
Ponderer there in the comments says, the sheer flow and economy to how information and feeling is conveyed in this movie is impeccable. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen any of Lord and Miller's other work. Like, I know people love them for the Lego movie, I guess I saw Solo, which is partly them in some way. But this movie really impressed me. These guys
they're really good visual storytellers, and this movie, a lot of the exposition is given to us visually, and it's really artistic about what it's putting on screen. I would make the argument, and this is what really got me in the theater with this movie. I had quite the experience the first time I saw this, because we talk all the time about the ways in which the MCU and even certain DC movies have brought comic book storytelling to film, and this one does it in the most blatant comic book way. Like, this feels like a comic book put on screen through and through, partly because there's so much just comic book imagery, and it's easier to do that with animation, where they're giving you the dot matrix stuff and all of that, but it also is paced like a comic book, I think.
I think so too, and I think the impressive thing about this movie when compared to the MCU is one of the excuses I see online that I don't agree with for the MCU watering down its characters is that, they get so ambitious with the interconnected novelty of the universe, and they have to water down this stuff because they don't have time to do all that kind of stuff in a movie. And here, we're taking a gigantic crossover thing done in the comics that I didn't really care for, and really grounded it in who these characters are as people, and doesn't feel the need to water them down or change them or anything like that. They just present them as they are quintessentially, and it's totally uncompromised, and I love that about this movie.
Yeah, it's really interesting how, and impressive, I don't know how they pulled it off, how accessible this movie is, but it doesn't seem too concerned with that.
No, not at all.
It's not scared that people aren't going to get what it's doing. It takes some risks. Just doing the Spider-Verse concept in the first place is kind of risky as a first thing you do in a universe, as opposed to a culmination of a bunch of stuff. And I don't know if you were with me on this. I think we had this conversation. I thought this was a really bad idea.
Yeah, well, I don't like Slott's run on Spider-Man in general, and don't really like Spider-Verse, because I thought it was a dumb novelty concept.
Same here.
I didn't think it was a good story. I was excited for a Miles Morales animated movie, and then they announced it was Spider-Verse. I was like, oh, that's not exciting. And then they made the movie, and it was amazing. So I guess I really hope Lord and Miller come back for the next one. and we don't get too spin-offy and start producing subpar sequels to this. Because if they can keep the quality of this up, I'm all in on everything they make in this series.
Yeah, I think it's a really good argument, and I don't know if I'm totally right about this, but it feels to me like an argument for taking a bunch of studio mandates and still managing to tell a really good story. Like, this feels like Sony gave them a laundry list of 15 things they had to do, and they'd be really difficult to integrate, and it wouldn't be concerned with telling stories so much as just trying to appeal to every demographic humanly possible. But this movie throws Spider-Man characters or Spider-Man, Spider-Men from different universes all together in a mix. Doesn't feel like there's too many characters in the film, and also tells a Miles Morales origin story that ends up feeling really worth it by the end, and he's got a real character arc, and it's really satisfying, and the Spider-Verse stuff doesn't get too much in the way. It feels like just and thematically I think it works really well, and I'll talk about that later, but because this starts with every character saying either I am the only Spider-Man or I thought I was the only Spider-Man, and the movie ends with everyone is Spider-Man in some way, and I like that a lot, and we'll talk about that as it goes along. But, so, like, it works really well thematically, but they don't feel like two things that inherently go together. The movie has to win me over on it, and it does.
No, I agree.
I think you could tell the Miles story pretty easily without the Spider-Verse stuff. I think all you need is another Peter Parker, and, like, you could rework this movie really easily to be just the Spider-Man in his universe trains him, and then he dies at the end. And you'd have almost the exact same story.
Yeah. But I do like that we get to play with a version of Peter Parker who's a little bit different from what we've seen before, but he's still at his core the same character. And I was going to mention, you know, one of the things that made me love this movie so much was not just the Miles stuff, but also the fact that you can tell Lord and Miller are so excited to work with the classic Spider-Man too, and understand who he is as a character, and they give him a character arc in this, which I think is very pertinent and earned and well executed as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You could kind of make the argument, I know I always go to this place, you could kind of make the argument for this being a dual protagonist film with Miles and the older Spider-Man. I think overall it is Miles' movie, and you've got a mentor who also goes through a character arc. I think the best thing I could compare it to in that way is this is a weird comparison, is kind of the first Creed movie, where the same thing is done with Rocky, where he's the mentor character, but he also goes through an arc, and so like it's not really a dual protagonist film because that's like well, I don't even want to say that arc is in the background, but, like, he's not on screen as much. It is very much Creed's movie, but his mentor also goes through an arc.
Oh, well, that's cool. Yeah, I think I can see the parallels for sure.
David says he doesn't care for the everybody is Spider-Man thing. It's like when everyone's special, nobody is. I don't think that's what the movie is getting at in this.
I think he's completely wrong.
I don't. I don't think that's what this movie is saying. I mean, I've seen that done poorly in other things, but I think the idea here is that everybody, to some degree, has to deal with power responsibility. Everybody has some degree of some kind of power, and we all have to figure out how to balance that with our responsibilities. Now, I don't, and this might be part of what David's getting at, we'll talk about when we get to the end, I don't like the line at the end, anybody can put on a costume, because it just doesn't make any sense. But other than that, I don't think that's what the movie's talking about.
Yeah, I think it's about also the fact that Spider-Man is a story that's all about the weight of balancing all the responsibilities in your life and how hard that is, and everyone has to make choices that aren't ideal at the time, and dealing with the fallout of those choices. Like, that's the humanity of Spider-Man is what makes the character interesting and popular. So that's kind of what the movie is getting at.
It's
Spider-Man
saying,
is human, just like all of us.
Here's why it speaks to everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not just human condition that, like, we all go through the same things. It's also teenage condition. And, like a lot of the Spider-Man in this movie are no longer teenagers, but they were at one time, and I think they all started off that way.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe Nor. No, Nor had his uncle killed when he was younger too. So I mean, like, I think everybody starts as a teenager.
Yeah. I'm just imagining Nicolas Cage as a teenager playing Spider-Man Noir now, and that would be amazing.
Yeah, I would pay good money to see that. Absolutely. So Dan, can we talk a little bit about the visuals in this movie, the just its visual style? How do you feel about the way it uses automatopoeia and comic book words and things like that?
I love it. I think it's so creative. I've never seen... Because, like, we've tried to do this in many different ways, right? Like, there's the Ang Lee Hulk method where you literally have, like, panels on the screen. You have the MCU method where they just cash in on the novelty of crossing over all the characters, like the comic books used to do sometimes in the early days. This is kind of like using the visual tools that comic books have to tell stories and integrating them into a film where it's not intrusive, and it actually improves how you consume the story and all of that. I think it's so cool. I can't say enough good things about it, to be honest.
I think it's often used as a really good comedic device. I think most of the time when there's words on the screen, it's in comedic scenes, and we're careful not to do it too much with heavy action scenes or with action, but we will use big comic words sometimes with explosions and things, but they're really careful not to make that too intrusive. I've heard some
my
people...
favorite use of it is during the scene where he's kind of running down the street and you see like the caption boxes that Spider-Man is so famous for in his internal monologues going while Miles is thinking. Like, I love that stuff. It's so cool.
The big thing that, I mean, I had almost an epiphany watching this movie. The big thing I took away from this was, theatrical superhero movies don't need to be live action.
Oh yeah,
like, I mean, like serious adult, and there's some cartoony stuff in this movie. Certainly, this is not just a straight up, ultra serious like you get with a lot of PG-13 and R the superhero movies thing. But I can take it as seriously as those. There are, I think, some kind of goofy things that it thinks it can get away with because it is a cartoon. And most of the time they don't bother me, but there's a couple of things like that. Like, you wouldn't do the like Aunt May runs a Batcave thing in live action. I just don't think you'd ever do that. That strikes me as like a cartoon thing to do. But by and large, whether you like that or not, that's a cartoon move. But by and large, this feels like enough of an adult superhero movie, and it certainly is like character and thematically weighty enough and has enough dimension with this character. He's got a real character arc that I'm like, okay, I want to see a Doctor Strange movie like this. You know,
oh, absolutely. That would be amazing. Are you kidding me? I want
to see Cosmic Marvel this way. Like, after I saw this, I don't want the live action Silver Surfer Galactus movie. I want the animated one that is
I especially don't want a Silver Surfer movie watered down like MCU Silver Surfer. Yuck.
Yeah, I just want it to, and I think they could do some cool things with it, but it's gonna be, here's the thing. Those movies, and there are, of course, exceptions to this, and I don't want to suddenly sound like I'm blasting the MCU just because I like this movie, because...
I'll do that for you.
No, that's fine, but I mean, I still, by and large, am happy with a lot of MCU, but they do play things safe a lot because they seem to be afraid that the material is going to get too cosmic and wild and confusing for an audience. This movie isn't afraid of that at all, and nobody complained about that. And it goes to those places.
The MCU movies have the disadvantage, too, of having the budgets be so astronomically high that they almost can't take risks, because if you take a risk with a movie that cost, like, millions upon millions upon millions of dollars to make, then you might not get a return, and, shareholders aren't happy and all that. The animated movies you can make on a cheaper budget. Maybe they take longer, of course, because of all the animation and stuff, but I don't know. I'd much rather see superhero movies that are ambitious in their stories than ambitious in the novelty of crossing over the characters and taking no risk with the story at all,
Yeah.
Like, if if we could get like movies about the X-Men that don't cross over with the MCU in animated form that like adapt the thematic weight.
Oh, it'd be
stories,
fantastic.
All of that, it would be amazing.
You could also do them more often.
Yeah.
Well, potentially. I mean, I guess you still have a couple of years in between animated movies, but.
Sure.
But you could do a season of television. You can just take a while to make it. Do 8 or 10 episodes. I think that's the absolute best way to handle X-Men. But when I was watching this, the first time out, and not everybody has this. I know some people complain that the frame rate makes them nauseous. I hear that a lot from people. I can't watch this movie because the animation gives me a headache. And I mean, I can't give anybody crap for that. It's just your eyes, you know, like that's unfortunate that anybody's having that with it. But when I was watching it, I had to keep reminding myself I was watching an animated thing. Like, the characters move so realistically that I kept forgetting. I mean, it just feels like a really stylized live-action film to me. I'm like, we don't need live-action anymore. We can do that with animation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, the character designs look similar enough to a, like, live-action real person that I agree. I'm not taken out by that. The fact that it's animated at all. It's not like these people look like Gru from Despicable Me or something like that, you know?
Yeah, and there's so much like Kirby-esque stuff that you can't translate in live action.
No, and of course Kirby never worked on Spider-Man, but
no, I'm just talking about with superhero movies in general, just with cosmic stuff. Sure. Yeah, I mean, Spider-Man is one of the characters that once you figure out how to put web swinging on screen is perfect for live action. So I don't mean to say that I never felt like I saw Spider-Man in a movie theater before I saw this movie. I'm not saying that. It did make me, in a weird way, feel like I'd never seen a comic book movie before. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but I had that feeling walking out of it. I was like, I thought this raised the bar. I thought it pushed envelopes.
Well, yeah, and the thing with this is that you can do the kind of more outlandish costumes and stuff like that, which kind of disappointed me that we didn't get the real Green Goblin design and we got this awful one. And
he's just a henchman?
Yeah. We can get, you know, the way the Prowler looks in the comic books pretty close, you know? I mean, that's super cool. So how do you feel about... I mean, I love this movie, but I do have nitpicks here and there.
Of course.
I don't really like the voice for the Kingpin in this movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just not how he sounds in my head. Kingpin with a Brooklyn accent is just weird to me.
That's fair. But I can throw at you what the argument for everything that's not what you thought of it in your head, which is it's a different universe. You're not looking at 616. You're looking at the Miles Morales universe version of Kingpin, and you can imagine
you could say that for any adaptation, though. Like,
well, no, you certainly can, but especially with this movie because, like I've heard a lot of people complain about certain characters in this and how they're not close enough to what they thought of in their mind when they read comics, and I'm like, but it's an alternate version of it. Like, if they went to 616 and then that Kingpin sounded just like this one, then I'd be like, yeah, okay. But like, you know, they're not giving you the same Dr. Octopus or the same Green Goblin because it's a different universe.
Right. Yeah. I guess I'm less concerned about the continuity aspect of it, and I just would have liked to have heard Kingpin sound a little bit more like I think Kingpin sounds like, regardless of the fact that it's an alternate universe. But
yeah, but
and the same thing with Green Goblin.
Sure, but then I gotta mention that. Yet a lot of people who didn't like this movie as well as you and I did, Dan, because there wasn't a Spider-Man that was close enough to the one they're used to.
Oh, really?
And that's the very same argument you're making with Kingpin. Yeah, I mean,
the Kingpin thing is a voice thing with me, but I think the character still is the character I in terms of how he's written. It's very, very similar to the character from the comic books, and I feel like the Spider-Man that's here is written very, very, very similarly to the one from the comic books as well. Like, the voice and the way the characters are written are distinct to me personally. You know?
No, I got you. No, that makes sense. But when you say that, and I agree with you, but when you say, like, you know, this Spider-Man feels like, you know, real consummate Spider-Man to you, yeah, but a lot of people didn't like the fact that, or at least some people didn't like the fact that you didn't have a version of Peter Parker in this that wasn't like, you know, older or, you know, like overweight or something. Like, you just have like the Peter Parker in Miles Morales' universe is like super rich, and so it feels like a different thing. But that didn't bother me because you can make the argument that we've seen like something closer to consummate Peter Parker in a bunch of other live-action movies, and we all know what that character is. But also, I wouldn't want Miles Morales dealing with a Peter Parker Spider-Man that was his age or that was going through the same things he was. Like, I see Miles Morales as the closest thing to regular Peter Parker in this movie.
I disagree with that, but I think that just because, like, the Peter Parker that we see in this movie, like, he has a gut, like, that doesn't bother me because, like, the way the character's written is very consistently consummate Spider-Man to me, you know? Like, Peter Parker, like, giving up and losing faith in the Spider-Man thing is, like, a recurring thing that happens in the books all the time. It just happens to be a different outgrowth of that here, I guess. Rather than him, like, putting the costume away for good, he's kind of depressed and addicted to fast food.
I'm not explaining myself well enough, and this is not my problem, so that's why it's difficult to explain, but I've heard this from several people. People like to complain that there's not a, like, regular status quo Peter Parker in this movie, and I don't think that's a problem.
I mean, what is regular status quo Peter Parker to these people? I mean, like, is it like Peter Parker who's married to Mary Jane? Is it Peter Parker that's college dating Gwen Stacy? Like what is their definition of that? You know what I mean?
Well, and what I liked about the two older Peter Parkers that you have in this is that you have one that was living kind of almost a perfect life, and then of course he dies because that's what would have to happen with Peter Parker, right?
Spider-Man,
like he's Spider-Man. So like,
whenever his life is going well, it always hits the fan and goes all the way down.
That guy's not gonna have a good ending. But then you have the reverse of that, where you have the older Peter Parker that has lost his wife and he's kind of lost everything and he's really unhappy, and then he gets redeemed at the end. And so I like that you've got the two flips of that coin, and then in the middle of that you've got Miles Morales, who is having something of a traditional teenage Spider-Man origin, on top of seeing how a bunch of Peter Parkers wind up down the road. I like that a lot.
Well, and one of the things I love about the Peter Parker in this film, the older fat one, is this movie deals with the consequences of Peter breaking up his marriage in a way that the comics were too afraid to touch and never addressed at all. Like, here, it's not a deal with the devil. Like, it's a real relationship issue that pulled them apart. And Peter Parker has to kind of go through an arc to realize that, like, you know, what Mary Jane wants out of their relationship is something that he wants to. Like, that's what Spider-Man stories are all about, the human aspect of it, not like him making a deal with Mephisto and they break up the marriage and then nothing is ever, the consequences of that action are never addressed, you know?
By the way, can I just say, because we just heard it, that the Prowler theme is awesome and really spooky, and I love his outfit a lot.
I like that the Prowler theme is kind of like it plays whenever he I'm saying it wrong. It makes that big like noise whenever he like almost sees someone or something too. Like, it's very well integrated, and it almost feels like a spotlight noise or something when the Prowler sees you. I don't know. It's super cool.
No, that's a good point. This movie is, and in a dramatic way, it's scored very often like a cartoon.
Yes. In a, like, modern way, too. I mean, I don't know what modern cartoons are like, because most of them just look like Adventure Time and are just, like, you know, 20-minute joke shorts now, from what I've observed. But, like, a lot of the, you know, old, you know, for example, like the Spider-Man animated series from the 90s and Spectacular Spider-Man, they do have those kind of, like, swelling dramatic scores and stuff. And here they use that stuff, but it's a little bit more, I I don't know, like, it doesn't sound like anything I've heard before, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but all I meant was that it's orchestrated for the scene. Like, so, like, specifically to emphasize whatever's going on in the scene. And you can use that for comedic effect, and you can also use it for dramatic effect. And I think that Lord and Miller took what they learned making the Lego movies, and they applied it to drama. I don't think this movie would be nearly as good if they hadn't done the Lego movie.
Oh, okay, cool. I
Because
really
they
like
use
all
a lot of
the
the same kind of devices and tricks and things. But for more of a dramatic thing. And of course, that's got a wonderful story as well. So, like, they already proved they could go to dramatic places. We're about to see Slimy Stan Lee, which is really funny.
Stan Lee's cameo is great here.
It's one of my favorites now, because it's real heartfelt for a minute, and then he's just really slimy. And I love that. Where, like, it seems like he's like really trying to give this kid like life advice. He says something really profound, and the camera moves. And again, so much of the comedy in this is visual comedy.
Yes.
They don't write that stuff in the dialogue.
Yeah, they don't feel the need to spell it out in the audience for the audience. In a lesser film, Stan Lee would have pointed at that sign and said "No refunds" or something like that.
Yeah, you don't need that. Cinematographic makes a really good point. He says that he thinks he's getting like a Winter Soldier vibe from the Prowler theme. Yeah, that's a good point. It is like that.
Comparison.
And I don't think it rips it off. I think it just does a similar thing. No, it's good. So I always, this is a pet peeve of mine, I always talk about this, so I guess I'll bring it up, but we have the, like, well, I guess it works okay in this. We have the, like, comic books and merchandising of a character in the, in this actual universe. Did people know he was Peter Parker before he died? Because I didn't think they did. That was my problem with it in the theater.
No, I don't think so. I think they just took the mask off when they discovered the body. I thought that was the idea.
That gag is funny. Yeah, but then he's got comics that show his origin, and that's kind of a problem if nobody knew who he was.
I mean, he doesn't have the same hair color that the Peter Parker from this universe does, so I guess theoretically this is just like a fictional story of who they think Spider-Man is in this universe or something.
That gets
like, he looks like classic 60s Peter Parker in those comics rather than the blonde-haired Ben Reilly looking one.
My 4-year-old thought this scene was so funny.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, like with every time like words like that would come on the screen, it would go, he just lost his mind. So the 4 and the 2 there are calling back to the number of the spider that bit him. And
cool.
I don't know why they picked 42, except everybody loves the number 42 because of Hitchhiker. And so I always want to read something into using the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. And I mean, like, this is a coming-of-age story. Like, that's the best I got. I don't know what exactly we're doing with 42, if anything, but that was the number choice.
Interesting.
And it pops up everywhere.
So in the comments here, the Ponderer says the comics in the movie have his alter ego named Billy, not Peter. I guess so that answers our question.
Okay, but the thing I'm talking about is just that the comics get it like frighteningly close to what it actually is. I think it's really fun because we see him actually reading the book and following it, and it kind of like doing much of the same things that's happening in his life, and we have to assume that it must have been pretty close for this version of Peter Parker also. And so I think it's just really funny that whoever wrote that got it like 98% right.
That's funny.
So somebody earlier asked how we feel about the blonde hair thing, and a lot of people, I don't want to say up in arms, but like everybody was talking about the blonde hair thing, and I don't know why that's even a thing to talk about. Like,
yeah, I just thought it was a cool little reference to Ben Reilly or the fact that Chris Pine is blonde haired or something, but I didn't really care about it too much.
I mean, even if his hair is not naturally blonde, like he could have just dyed it or something.
Right.
I think it goes well with the with the characterization of that version of Peter Parker, where, like, he's not taking himself too seriously, and he's a lot more sure of himself now and all of that. Where, like, that guy being kind of beach blonde, I get that. I think that's a good choice. And did you have this thought, Dan? I wonder if they went to this on purpose or if it just is an interesting coincidence, but we've had a super rich alternate history version of Spider-Man before.
And Slott did it in the mainstream continuity, too.
Did he? But he's...
Yeah, remember the Spider-Man having his own company after Superior, and he was basically Iron Man for a while there?
Yeah, that's right. There's that, and then there's the one... There's the... I don't remember if there's a name for him or what it is, but there's the one with the... It wasn't an Iron Man suit, but he had like a metal suit, and he's in the last episode of the 90s series of the cartoon.
Oh, you mean the silvery metal suit one?
Yes! And the point of that one was that he was a Spider-Man who got everything he ever wanted and he lost his sense of responsibility. And this is like that version if he didn't lose his sense of responsibility.
Right.
And I think he was also blonde.
Oh, was he?
I think. I don't know if I'm remembering that right, but when I saw it in the theater, I was like, oh, they're doing that guy! And then he turned out to be, like, totally above board and was altruistic, and I was like, oh, they're not doing that version, okay. But I kind of like the idea of, like, a perfect blend between Spider-Man and Batman, which is how I see that version, where, like, he's super rich, but he doesn't let it change him too much, and he's not, he's not like, you know, dark and broody, and it doesn't come from like a super selfish place like it sometimes does with Batman, but he's like Batman in that he uses his riches to help people and not just to like flaunt himself or something. And he's got like a Batcave. But I thought they did that on purpose. It was like they took Spider-Man and they like perfectly married him to Batman.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised, because, like, the guys who made this movie are obviously very excited to work with this material, and they're pulling from so many different things, you know?
We also know they love Batman.
Oh, do they?
Well, yeah, because they made the Lego Batman movie. And they're the ones that put Batman... And they're the ones that put Batman all over the Lego movie. I mean, like, they sold that movie on Batman.
Oh, was he all over that movie? I've never seen any of them, so I just don't know.
Yeah, Batman is a supporting character in the Lego movie.
Oh,
and then the Lego Batman movie is a spin-off of that movie. And he's like a completely different character. He's not Batman at all. Because the idea is that there's a kid playing with toys that's creating these characters who seems to know nothing about Batman and does not understand him at all. And then the Lego Batman movie, I guess that kid suddenly started reading Batman because it's got a lot of references and deep pull things.
Oh, cool. Cool. So it wouldn't be a Spider-Man movie without some sort of subway train scene.
Yeah, you always gotta do that. And they also alluded to other ones that have happened.
Right, the one from Spider-Man 2 at the beginning and stuff like that.
This was the scene that they sold the movie on.
Which is super weird.
Yeah, isn't it? Well, it's almost like they were trying to appeal to kids or something. And I would think you'd go the other way. I would think that everyone would expect this to be kind of a cartoony romp, and you'd want to show something really dramatic to try to get the adults to go.
Yeah. I mean, again, Sony not knowing how to sell a Spider-Man movie is for the course, right? Like, remember the 8-minute trailers that they put out for Amazing 2?
Well, yeah, I don't let anyone forget about them. No, I think they did a better job selling this than they ever have.
Sure. Yeah, I'd say so.
And maybe selling anything. And they didn't... I don't know. They didn't show us... I mean, they maybe showed us too much, but it wasn't nearly as bad as a lot of other things that they've made. And they definitely didn't make me want to see it, so that's good.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like when Sony has a good product... easy to sell. Well, what do you know, guys? Maybe we just make good movies.
It's a really good point. But it would be really funny if they were like so unsure of everything they were making that they didn't know they had a good movie on their hands. So they made all the same mistakes.
Well, it's interesting to see what's going to happen moving forward with the Spider-Man film series, because I don't know if you heard, because Amy Pascal jumped ship. She's no longer at Sony. She got a job at another film studio. I don't remember which one it was. One of the big conglomerates, I'm sure.
That's probably for the best.
But this movie was a Pascal Pictures production, her production company. So I don't know. I'm sure Sony will it'll be well within their rights to continue all of these, spin-offs and stuff they have planned and whatever they make for a sequel to this. But I don't know how instrumental she was in making this movie happen, because her production company's name was on it and everything. But yeah, I just think that's super interesting because she had some loony ideas for Spider-Man in the leaked Sony emails.
Yes, she did. Yeah, but I mean, credit where it's due if she had very much to do with getting this launched in the first place. But yeah, they're not going to need her to keep that going because after it did as well, at least critically, as it did. And because I don't think it made a ton of money, but it did fine for this kind of thing.
Yeah. I think I would anticipate the next one making more money because of the good word of mouth that this one got from fans.
It won an Oscar. Yeah, like you can't undersell the importance of that. Now,
well, not even one of the this sound Oscar or something.
No, it won Best Animated Picture. I mean, that's a major Oscar.
That's a pretty big accomplishment. Yeah.
And here's the thing: I don't want to downplay the accomplishment that is. I also think it's important to say that it went up against nothing. And if this had come out in a different year, it probably would not have won that Oscar. That struck me as almost begrudging, because I get the sense that the Academy does everything they can to make sure that superhero movies do not win major Oscars. And I think that only happened because it didn't really go up against great movies, and one of the other ones was a superhero movie, and it was Incredibles 2, and that's fine, but it's not as good as this. So, if it had lost out to that, it would have been obvious that they were like, yeah, we just don't want a Spider-Man movie to win the Oscar.
Well, and it's interesting that imagine if they picked Incredibles over this movie because they don't want a Spider-Man movie to win, but it's also an animated superhero movie.
Yeah, exactly.
So
weird.
They're
like, well, it's Pixar, so we'll excuse it this time.
The Supreme Overlord Iger will destroy us if we don't give it an Oscar.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous moving forward that there will be some milking this for all it's worth from Sony, and they'll put out some lesser products. And I really hope that doesn't happen. I hope they're careful about it because, in theory, making TV shows based on this is an obvious and good idea. But who knows if they'll turn out?
I would love to see a Spider-Gwen movie from this universe.
Yeah, of course.
All of that, which I think they may have confirmed already. I don't know if that's a thing.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about any quote-unquote confirmations with Sony because I've heard so many things that they've said are definitely happening. Yeah, whatever. Let's wait until they go into pre-production. At the very least.
I mean they're not Warner Brothers bad, but they are pretty bad about
They used to be Warner Brothers bad. Back when
I don't think anyone has aspired to being Warner Brothers bad.
They were close right after Amazing 2, man. When they started announcing stuff and then stuff with the Sony League, I was just like, you guys are insane.
That's true. But at least most of the crazy stuff we heard about with the Sony leak, it was not official announcements. Warner Brothers just officially announces all their crazy stuff.
Yes, they do. They're not saying most of it never happens. Ponderer says, I miss Jameson being in movies.
Yeah. I thought that it would have been interesting to have him in this movie in some capacity. Having J.K. Simmons reprise the voice or something. That would have been cool. Even at the beginning, at the montage of Spider-Man, being a celebrity and all of that, when they were referencing the Raimi films, I kind of expected to see Jameson in some capacity, but
yeah, it might have been difficult to have him as a major character in this film, given that Miles wouldn't really interact with him much. But you could have done something.
Yeah.
But back to something we were talking about toward the beginning, I just want to reiterate this and kind of drive it home that after we found out what this premise was, I really didn't expect it to be an actual character piece for Miles. And I'm just so impressed that it worked out that way.
I didn't expect it to be a character piece for either of these characters, which is so exciting, And
then it gets what Spider-Man's all about and then delivers it in very unconventional ways.
Yeah.
that's the thing that I really liked about this. It has all the quintessential aspects of Spider-Man's character that has made him popular and persist as a cultural icon, and put a new spin on it without changing the essence of the character, and making it into a sort of bastardization, changing it for the sake of change,
Yeah.
It's really, really impressive. It's a tough line to walk, as I'm sure everyone knows, with the high-profile examples recently of fans kind of revolting on the writers of various things. Game of Thrones being one of the more recent ones.
Yeah.
And people feeling like they betrayed the spirit of the characters and what the stories are all about. But
trying to get them to remake the thing.
Yeah. And I am totally happy. I am not going to make a petition to have this movie. Not that I would have been that disappointed if it was bad. As Game of Thrones fans seem to be about that show, but.
Another thing that's really impressive about this is that it kind of subverts expectations with... Maybe that's not the way to put it. It's really interesting that this does not feel like a typical superhero movie, but it does origin anyway. Like, it gives us Miles's origin, but not because it feels like it's got to hold your hand and you're not going to understand what you're looking at if you don't go to the beginning of a character, because it also gives us 6 other Spider-Men that have all already gone through origins, and it also kind of serves as a parody of the superhero origin film.
It kind of does, yeah, you're right. I also like how it subverts expectations, and this is a Spider-Man classic thing. Like, they do this with the Vulture in Homecoming. This is the reason why the Green Goblin story originally is so compelling. It's sort of like with Dr. Octopus here. I did not expect this lady to be Dr. Octopus.
Me neither.
But thinking about it, they go with the 2099 version of Dr. Octopus and she works for Alchemex. Like, looking back now, I'm like, oh, I should have expected that. But
I totally forgot that was the 2099 version. And I think they were trying to throw us 2099 fans a bone a little bit because we were all disappointed that he wasn't in this. And now that I've seen the movie, yeah, that would have been too much because you are doing Alchemex, and there would have been way too much exposition you'd have to do with that. Like, there's no way you could bring in 2099 and not talk about his connection to that company and all of that. Like, yeah, I bet they started with a draft and thought he was going to be in it and decided to scrap him.
Well, and I'm almost certain that moving forward, like, we're going to get stuff with him. I mean, they cast Oscar Isaac. One of the best actors working today as him.
I think it's very possible the next thing we see is just a standalone 2099 movie. But maybe that's wishful thinking. That's what I want. That's all I want.
The coolest thing in the whole world.
I know.
Man. I would love that.
That's all I want. It would be really exciting. And what little we saw of what their animation style for that would be is Bossa Nova. I also want to mention, talking about different animation styles, that this movie has a very unique, specific style, but we will occasionally see glimpses of other universes, and they move away from it and go real heavy comic book, whatever that universe looks like. And I was so excited about the glimpse we got of Spider-Gwen's. I was really disappointed that we didn't get to live there for any amount of time, because it translates great to animation.
Yeah, I forget. Is it Jason Latour, the artist for Spider-Gwen?
Yes.
I read some of that stuff.
Yes, and it's great.
Yeah, his art style, I wouldn't think that you'd be able to translate that into a film context, but they do, and it's so cool.
One of the... Oh, Solar Dragon, I agree with that. Solar Dragon says he wouldn't want a 2099 movie to be as jokey as this film. I agree with that, but I would love to think that spinning off from this, you can do other kinds of tones, and they wouldn't feel the need to do the MCU thing of everything sort of has its own tone, but it's also got a house style. This is the last thing that should have a house style. Like, every movie should feel like a different thing.
Yeah, and I think if they really understand Spider-Man 2099 as a character, I mean, Peter David always talks about how the kind of whole point of Miguel as a character is to kind of be the opposite of Peter Parker in many ways, and Miguel is not a jokey character. He's not even a character that talks a whole lot when he's in the mask, you know? He's very sharp and quick-witted outside of the costume. It's kind of the opposite. It's
the opposite, yeah.
Peter.
And that's what's so cool about 2099 is, yeah, he's monosyllabic. He's like Batman. He doesn't say anything.
Exactly, yes.
And which is kind of fun, because then the futuristic version of Batman that is like 2099 is the one that is more like Spider-Man and jokes all the time.
Yeah.
With Batman Beyond. I've always loved that. And I've always wanted to see those characters get put together, because it would be perfect.
That would be perfect. And I could see a 2099 movie being, like, Miguel is serious, but other characters are, you know,
comic relief and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, what I thought you were going to say a minute ago was you started to say, if they understand the character of 2099, they would, and I thought you were going to say, let Peter David write it!
Oh my god, that'd be amazing. Yes.
I don't think it would be right to do anything else, really.
I mean, Peter David's... Has anyone else touched that character in a, like, solo capacity?
Nope, he's done 3 volumes of it, and it was all him.
3 volumes, plus he did the second video game where Miguel showed up too, so he's even got that claim to fame.
I guess the only person that... Well, I'm sure he's shown up in stuff that other people have written, because he's in Spider-Verse and stuff like that, but I was going to say, like, I think Dan Slott's probably written him more than anybody at this point, besides Peter David. Probably.
Yeah, I suppose that's true, because I think Slott is sort of... I mean, as much as I don't love Slott's run on Spider-Man, he's responsible, I think, for bringing that version of Spider-Man back into prominence.
Yep, and you know what? I will give him all the credit for that.
Absolutely.
Because 2099 is one of my favorite things. It's one of my favorite designs of anything. I think it's my favorite Spider-Man costume, like, overall. And it was really nice. It was really neat of him to bring it back.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love that costume, too. I can't say it's one of my favorites. I mean, because the black suit is always my number one.
But it's a nostalgic thing for me. Like the first issue of 2099 was one of the first issues I owned. Like it was.
And it's a great design. I mean, I don't begrudge you for choosing that. You know, like I could see that being your choice. I'm just saying personally, I couldn't put it up there for me because I do love the black the comic book black.
As soon as I unlocked it in the PS4 game, it was the only one I used. I occasionally cut over to Ben Reilly, but it was I used 2099 constantly.
I still am angry that I can't play that game.
Dan, I'll bring my PS4 with me when I come see you.
Alright, great.
I really like all of this training stuff, and I like that it's on-the-job training.
Yeah, I like that too.
Isn't it nice that we don't have to spend 15 minutes watching this guy learn how to be Spider-Man? That, like, we're constantly progressing story as we're doing that stuff. And, like, it's necessary, and you gotta see him figure out how to use his powers, and he can't just suddenly know what he's doing, because that wouldn't make sense, but we don't have to waste a lot of time with it.
Well, right, and then this kind of routine mission they were doing turned into something that they didn't expect, because they didn't expect Dr. Octopus to be in there, and that makes it exciting. It's really well crafted, I think.
And it also feels like part of his coming of age story, and that like his learning to be Spider-Man happens simultaneous with his learning who he is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, that's what Spider-Man quintessentially is all about, right?
Yeah.
So I think your point earlier about Miles Morales being more similar to one of the definitive versions of Peter Parker is correct in that, you know, we have in my mind, the definitive adult-ish Spider-Man here with Peter B. Parker, and then we have the teenage version with Miles, which is perfect, because every time we get a version of Spider-Man, you'll have one camp that's like, oh, why does he have to be a teenager? Like, this is what happened when Tom Holland was cast. They're like, oh, this kid looks like he's 15. That's weird. And I'm like, well, you haven't read Spider-Man comics. Some of the best stories with the character are when he's around that age. And then, you know, there are people, whenever they have the adult version, that are like, oh, I wish he was a teenager. Here, we get both, which is great.
Yeah. I guess when I said definitive, you're absolutely right. And obviously, the Peter Parker, or the Spider-Man I think of, is not teenage Peter Parker, because I grew up with Spider-Man when he was married. But I guess all I meant by that was, he's closer to, like, a regular status quo that we're familiar with, that we, like, have read about regularly, where like all of the other versions are somewhere else that would be like in an alternate history future kind of thing. Because I
suppose, Peter Parker having relationship trouble with Mary Jane is pretty definitive, you know?
No, that's right. I'm just saying, but he's just a lot farther in the future. We've never done 35-year-old Spider-Man. He's always in his like mid-20s.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose that's true.
I mean, we have in alternate continuities. Marvel 2 is that. Spider-Man.
But you're talking about mainline 616 continuity. Yeah.
Yeah. So here it is. Here's the Spider-Man stuff. Cool. It's so cool. The only thing I don't like about it is, well, and this isn't even that big of a deal, because obviously all this stuff can be fleshed out later, but I think that these guys were so smart in being careful that the supporting cast doesn't take over, that they're actually underutilized.
Okay.
we really don't do quite enough with them. And Gwen Stacy's background is so interesting, and of course we don't have time to really deal with it, but an audience that has never read that stuff is not going to be lost because they don't really need to know this stuff that much to appreciate what happens throughout the film. But, like, you get just a real quick glimpse of Lizard Peter Parker and even of her in a rock band. You wouldn't even know who the other girls are in the rock band. And so this was all great for me as a comic reader, but I found myself going, I wish the rest of the audience got to know all the stuff that I know they're doing right now, because it's kind of just playing lip service to.
Yeah, I think it would have been cool, like, if we saw Gwen in the crowd when Mary Jane was giving the speech and being kind of amazed, like, oh my god, that's, like, a girl that's the singer in our band. Like, this is crazy, you know?
I think it's a little bit silly and weird that she has to have an origin for that haircut, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like that in that I thought, when I saw, like, promo images for this, I was like, oh, that is an atrocious haircut.
So at least there's a reason for it.
I like that it's, like, purposely atrocious. Like, it's not supposed to look good. In like, Gwen is, like, not... She's dissatisfied with it, you know? But she's like, oh, I wish you didn't rip my hair off.
Yeah, that was weird, and it also not nearly as bad as the first Spider-Man or Amazing does it, but it also does that thing where all these kids see Miles Morales using what have to be spider powers, and nobody knows he's Spider-Man.
One of my nitpicks about this movie, is that I don't think the Kingpin's motivation is fleshed out enough if you're not a comic book fan.
Same here, yeah.
Like, I think they do rely on the fact that if you're a comic book fan, you know how obsessively in love the Kingpin is with Vanessa. But if you're not, then it's kind of generic, you know? Like, it's just like, oh, his family was killed.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, I love the idea that it happens to him in every universe.
Yeah, and I do like that we kind of make a case for Kingpin being a Spider-Man villain here, in that paralleling with him with Peter Parker. Like, Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man because of a tragic death of a family member, and the Kingpin is motivated here by the same thing, to do evil. And I like that as an idea. I just wish it was fleshed out a little bit.
And that he comes at it from the opposite end, where instead of it teaching him power and responsibility, it's I'm gonna, like, I like how big that is. If you have to do Spider-Verse, that's the way to do it, right? Where, like, it doesn't watch so much as just an excuse to have all these different versions of Spider-Man there. Like, that's how it starts, but they're just smart enough to actually make it a thematic thing, so that we take the opposite of power and responsibility so far that it's a guy who loses the most important thing to him, and the entire multiverse is at risk. And that it comes from a personal place.
Yes,
that's
I also really
so much better than just, there's this group of people who eat spider people, and they're gonna go through the universe and eat the spider people!
Yeah, that is dumb. I also like that the impetus, the villains of this story are all mobsters, because I think a lot of people forget how in the early stories, like, even the Green Goblin was trying to take over organized crime in New York City. Like, early Spider-Man stories are all low scale, very street level, like Daredevil mobster stuff.
Yeah.
It's not as dark as that stuff, but that's what the stories are about.
And it lives in that world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not like how we see in the trailer from, like, Far From Home, where, like, you know, Mysterio's popping in from alternate dimensions and the city's getting destroyed and all that. It's very close to home, very small and personal stakes. And while we have the interdimensional plot going on here, I love that we kind of ground it in that. And we even get, like, obscure mobster villains for Spider-Man, like Tombstone cameos in here, which I thought was really cool, you know?
Yeah. No, it goes to real deep hole places. But again, doesn't feel like you have to know that stuff for the most part to really appreciate it.
Right.
But I'm with you. Like, my biggest criticisms of this movie are the places where I feel like I only really appreciate what's happening because I'm a comic fan. But it didn't seem to... It's one of those things where I think there's stuff you're missing if you haven't read the comics, and you're getting more than the bare bones of the plot, so you're not catching the stuff that you're missing. But I wish you could appreciate it like I do, because part of the fun for this, for me, is all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think that maybe that's what I appreciated so much about this movie, is just that it's made for comic book fans. You know, it's not made for the mainstream lowest common denominator audience that the MCU films are made for sometimes.
But
Not
it also
all of them are like
proves
that.
it appeals to them just fine. It's the thing I'm always saying, where, like, I don't have to already be a big fan of a franchise or even of a particular genre of a thing. If a movie is great and I get wrapped up in it, I can be won over. And I think this movie wins people over who maybe like Spider-Man from the movies they've seen, but they throw all this comic stuff at them, and it knows how to it knows how to logically present a story, and it gives us a Luke Skywalker-esque, like, eyes-in character in Miles, so nobody's lost, even with all that crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And so you can put Spider-Ham in here, and nobody's like, I'm out. I'm done. I can't deal with this. It's got Spider-Ham. And that's a character I always wanted to see somehow put in something. And was really happy that it worked in this. And I thought it might be obnoxious. But it's the perfect voice. I can't imagine anybody else voicing that.
Oh, John Mulaney is a comedian that I haven't seen all of his specials, but I've seen a few of them, and I really like his stand-up comedy. So I was excited that he was cast in this movie, and I see him in this movie. He's just perfect. So this mech anime-esque version of Spider-Man, is that a version from the comics? Because I'm not familiar with
It's a Spider-Verse thing, I think.
Okay.
I think that was one of the characters. Somebody correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. We haven't actually been interacting with the viewers. I just got caught up in my conversation with Dan.
I saw them talking about Game of Thrones anyway.
So you just kind of tapped out.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't watch that show. I don't know anything about it, so...
Oh man, this Peter Porker thing is so fun. I was bitten by a radioactive pig! And I also really like doing all of their origins simultaneously. It's so funny.
I like to fight Nazis.
And sometimes I let the flame burn all the way down just to feel something. It's amazing. But yeah, I wasn't, I didn't realize that scene happened right then. But anyway, I wasn't familiar with her, but I think, or maybe I just forgot about her. I think she pops up in Spider-Verse. I think she was one of the characters who had one of those one-shot specials before Spider-Verse started, like Spider-Gwen did. But I'm not sure if I'm right about that. I don't think she's actually an anime or actually a manga.
Yeah, because there have been manga versions of Spider-Man before. I just didn't know if she was the one. And I think this is the thing that she reminded me of is the of course the infamous Japanese television show Spider-Man that has a giant mech Power Rangers fighting thing. Right. So that's what I thought of immediately when she showed up. But if you're probably right that she's from the Spider-Verse stuff.
But the background for her is the most manga thing. Like, it feels real authentic. I love it that she's got like this pet spider that lives in the mech. And it's so bizarre. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I would read her now. Like, now that I know what her background is, I kind of want to read that. I think it's really funny.
Yeah, it's interesting that Spider-Gwen, of all the characters that were created for that, I guess. I was under the assumption that Spider-Gwen was the only one, but apparently there's more than one. It's interesting that Spider-Gwen caught on so much more.
Yeah, and I can't remember. There's the punk rock Spider-Man, and I don't know what he was invented for, but he shows up in Spider-Geddon, and so maybe he was made for Spider-Verse. I'm not even sure, but I think there were some other ones.
See, this is when I was tuned out of Spider-Man comics, I guess. I didn't know there was a Spider-Geddon.
Well, Spider-Geddon was real recent. It's just Spider-Verse 2, and it's just more of the same. I read 2 issues and was like, nah, I'm good.
Was it written by Slott?
No. No, but my problem with it was whatever they're called, it was the Spider People Eaters again. Like, if you're going to do Spider-Verse again, come up with a different threat or a different reason to get all the characters together. Like, I didn't like that in the first place. Why would I like it a second time? Dan, have you ever read Noir?
Yes, I've read the 2 volumes of it that they put out. There's 2 miniseries. The first one's called Spider-Man Noir, and the second one's called Spider-Man Noir Eyes Without a Face.
Oh, I didn't know about that
which always makes me think of that Billy Idol song, Eyes Without a Face. I really think it's funny. But yeah, I love both of them. I think they're both really great. I haven't read any of the other Marvel Noir comic books, but the Spider-Man ones I quite liked. I thought they were quite great from what I remember. I read them many years ago.
I just read the first issue last week, and I haven't gone any farther, but I thought it was spectacular.
Oh, they're pretty dynamite, and I love the artwork in them too.
Yeah.
It's so well done. I think David Liss wrote those, right?
I don't remember.
I think that's who wrote them.
So Ultron32 in the comments says Penny Parker is from the Spider-Verse comic, and he thinks Gerard Way created her.
Oh, interesting. Gerard Way. That name sounds familiar. He's probably one of the 800 writers that wrote X-Men in the 90s. That's probably what I know him from.
Yeah, he was a 90s guy. I can't remember probably so. That's probably what it was.
I probably read some of his stuff in the Age of Apocalypse trades I have, which is just like, so many X-Men books I would not read otherwise. Like X-Man, I think, is one of them, and he's supposed to be like the most powerful. Yeah, that was... Anyway.
Somebody said, and I can't find it now, but somebody said that they thought everybody liked Spider-Gwen, but they're starting to hear people complaining that that's a character they don't like. I haven't heard anybody complain about Spider-Gwen as a character. Is
just
that like for existing or what? Yeah, it's still around. We just got they just started a new volume. I think it's into issue 7 or 8 now, and it's called Ghost Spider, because they finally gave her a name, which is awesome, because you look at that outfit and that's just perfect. And in fact, they came up with Ghost Spider like while this was in production, and I thought there was a chance that her character name, or that her superhero name would show up in the movie, but I think it happened just too late.
Wasn't she called Spider-Woman in the comics before?
She was, yeah. And she talks about it. I read the first issue the other day, and she talks about it like Spider-Woman was too derivative. Like she's been hanging out with other people named Spider-Woman, and she just wanted something else. And she's also, spoiler alert for that series, but she's been outed. Everybody knows that she's Gwen Stacy now. So Spider-Gwen caught on, and people were also calling her Spider-Gwen. And I think she came up with Ghost Spider so that she would have a completely different thing, and people wouldn't be calling her Spider-Gwen.
So, is she in mainline continuity now, or is she still in her own universe?
She's always been in mainline continuity. She jumps back and forth. So she lives in her universe, but she has a portal thing, and she can come into 616 whenever she wants to.
Okay, because I knew that she had like a romance with Miles Morales.
She
did.
I
haven't read that stuff yet. I have like the first 4 trades, I think.
And that's what they're alluding to in this film when she pops up right at the end, like above him through the portal, is that she's got a way to go back and forth, and they'll probably have a romance.
Great, because that's awesome. I think the version of these characters, at least as they exist in this movie, are perfect together. I would love to see that. That'd be awesome.
So all of this right now strikes me as the most classic Spider-Man stuff in the movie.
Yes, absolutely.
This kind of like almost Shakespearean, like not knowing who's under the mask stuff.
Well, yeah, and the revelation of a villain's secret identity being directly connected to the personal life of the character that is Spider-Man is classic. Like that's why the Norman Osborn issues 39 and 40, where we reveal the identity of the Green Goblin as being Norman Osborn. Like that's why they're so well remembered, is because of that trope. And we do it with of course, every version in the movies, the character, the villain in the movie has some sort of personal connection to Peter Parker, and we did even the reveal thing in Spider-Man: Homecoming, which was really cool with the Vulture.
Yeah, Solar Dragon, she's not way older than him. Somebody said 15 months. I didn't know the exact number, but no, they are close in age.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
God, that shot is so cool.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, all of that is obviously super sad and tragic. Obviously, we change some things, but we truncate like 25 or 30 issues of Bendis' initial run and put it in this movie.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not quite that many, but it's, because he's pretty decompressed. It was a while before we did the whole, he finds out that his uncle is the Prowler and he dies and all that stuff.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I love Bendis. I mean, he's written some of my, favorite runs on comics of all time. Ultimate Spider-Man, Daredevil, all that stuff. But, man, his Miles Morales series was slow.
Yeah, Miles is Solar Dragon a lot younger than Peter in the comics, but that version of Gwen Stacy is real young.
Yeah, she's a teenager. And
they don't hook up in the comics until Miles is older, because he starts at like 13, 14, like he's real young at the beginning.
Yeah, he is. He's like 13, I think, in the first issue.
We have aged him up some now.
Which is, I think, is good.
Me too, but they're going to be stuck with that for a long time. Like, it's going to read funny if you go back to it, because he'll age almost in real time, and then he'll just stop for like a decade.
Yeah, I think the reason why people are kind of confused about that age thing is because, like, Gwen Stacy doesn't show up in the comic books until Peter Parker's in college. So it's sort of like people always perpetually remember her as a college student rather than being a younger teenager like she is in the Spider-Gwen stuff.
Yeah. So now we have a big fight inside an old woman's apartment.
Penny Parker's like mech montages are just hysterical.
Yeah, they're great. So how do you, Dan, feel about kind of badass Alfred and Aunt May?
I don't mind it because she reminds me a lot of the Ultimate version of Aunt May, which is what they're kind of basing it off of here, where she has all the superhero kids living in her house and all of that. That doesn't really bother me because it's, I don't know. It's Ultimate Aunt May taken to a crazy extreme for kind of comedy purposes, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of two minds about it, but it doesn't bother me a great deal. It kind of makes sense that this version of Peter Parker, who had his own company and got that rich, would have that.
It's weird that it's at Aunt May's house, though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, wouldn't rich Peter Parker have his own, like, spider mansion? Where he has that underground.
Well, maybe he does, but it's like it's like just a secondary thing in case something happened to that. You know, like Batman's always got like alternate Batcaves. You know, I think it makes a lot of sense, or maybe some sense, enough sense that I can sort of be okay with this very cartoony version of Aunt May. That he would have like a secondary base that his aunt watched for him, and she could maybe like send him things when he needs help or something, sort of like Alfred in the Arkham games.
I'm just imagining, like, Peter Parker communicating with Aunt May on a communicator while he's swinging around fighting villains and stuff. That's hysterical. Like, Peter, come home for wheat cakes later.
I gotta say this real quick because it's pertinent to this scene. This scene got me real hard in the theater. And I love how, like, all the sound goes out and, like, time stops and Aaron doesn't know what to do. He's, of course, a pretty sympathetic antagonist. They do a wonderful job, by the way, of giving you everything you need about that character and making him very layered and complex and sympathetic in a very short amount of time. Like, we don't have a lot of time to do a lot with him. And the last thing I thought would happen in that scene would be Kingpin would decide he's taken too long and he just shoots him. And I didn't need the movie to win me over, but if I had, that would have been the thing that would do it. Because it wasn't just a cartoon before, but, like, we're just telling a story now. We're not scared of stuff like that.
Yeah, and I liked that we kind of are introduced to this character through Miles's eyes, and we don't really realize why his father has such a problem with him and why they had a falling out and stuff, and that immediately becomes apparent when you learn his identity. And
that's a good point. Yeah, it's just so adept at giving you that information without pages and pages of exposition.
Yeah, it's really well done.
It just does it through character motivations, like, and it gives the audience a lot of credit. You know, the one prerequisite it expects from us is that we've ever seen a well-told story. Because all it has to do is what good stories are supposed to. It implies things, we infer things. That's all good storytelling is. It's that and it's setup and payoff. This movie is also really great at setup and payoff, although I think a few too many setups or payoffs happen in a row at the end where it feels a little bit formulaic's not the right word, but it feels a little bit like we're turning in a homework assignment at the end, where it's like, remember all these lines we said at the beginning? We're either going to repeat them at the end or pay them off in some way, and we do like 12 in a row.
Yeah, and I really like, too, that this is sort of, classic
Spider-Man villain motivation. Like, most of Spider-Man's great villains are not mustache twirling bad guys. They have very personal motivations for doing the things that they do. You know, it's like Kingpin here. The reason why he's doing what he does is based, you know, on the fact that, you know, he misses his family. Miles' uncle here, the reason why he does what he does is because he wasn't able to overcome the circumstances of his birth like Miles' father was able to. He didn't have the same kind of strength and resolve to become a family man, a, you know, functioning member of regular society and all that. I think all of that is really, really well done.
So, I've never heard this before. I like this a lot. Rendeva says it's what Aaron Stanton said. Give the audience 2 + 2, but don't give them 4. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Dan, to your point a minute ago, most great Spider-Man villains are in some way or another not just direct parallels or mirrors to Peter Parker, but characters, but like who Peter Parker might have been had he gone down the wrong path.
Exactly.
And
yes.
that is precisely what Aaron is supposed to be. And they nail that. I mean, that's what he is in the comics, and that's what he is here. They absolutely nail that.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, that was fun. You guys can just watch the rest of the movie now. We're done. We have nothing left to say.
So one of the things I think is cool about this is just sort of a, you know, superficial thing, I guess, but the Spider-Man Noir mask here with the webbing on it, I don't think the one in the comic books has webbing on it, and it kind of reminds me of the Spider-Man 3 symbiote costume.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
From what I remember, I don't think it has webbing on it.
I didn't think it did either.
And here we have Skinny Gank, because we used basically Gank as Ned Leeds in Homecoming, so I guess we can't have real Gank in this movie.
Yeah, and we can't let him be what he is 4 miles in the comics because he would be too close to what we've been doing in Homecoming. And I love that dynamic, and I was fine with it. And then we decided to make a Miles Morales movie, and it's so weird how we flipped it, where now Miles is the character that has no one to talk to except other Spider-Mans.
It would be like if they put Harry Osborn in this movie, and he was like, or a character that was basically Harry Osborn with a different name, and then we couldn't use him in the MCU movies because of it.
That's exactly what it is. Isn't that so weird?
It is weird.
It's also impressive that this movie manages to be as great as it is with all the weird rights things between Sony and Marvel. Like, they navigate that minefield wonderfully. It's also impressive... Or it's also interesting to me that they're even allowed to use Kingpin. Like, I don't know what that's about. I don't know what the rights things are with that, but like...
Because the Kingpin first appeared in Spider-Man, I guess, they have the rights to him, but I don't know why that would give Marvel the rights to use him in the Daredevil
That's
stuff.
what I'm saying. Like, I get why they have it, but why do they both have it?
I have no idea. I'm just glad that we've gotten, like so many good adaptations of the Kingpin on film so far, you know? Like, I even like the one from the Ben Affleck movie. Call me crazy, but I kind of liked Michael Clark Duncan in that movie.
Dude, you're not crazy. I liked him there, too, and I think if he was given better material, he would be remembered for that role.
I agree. I mean, I think he was very well cast in that movie. One of the better choices, for sure.
Do you remember the MTV Spider-Man show used that version? And I honestly thought... Because the thing is, I've got a different perspective on Daredevil because, it got a lot of flack later, but more people liked it when it came out, and I was really into that movie when it came out.
I'm still kind of into that movie. I like watching the director's cut. I know it's not perfect, but I like a lot of things about it.
Yeah, but, I don't know, when you and I and Eric did a commentary on it, it didn't hold up great, and then the MCU show came out, and we were all like, oh, I don't know if we can ever watch this show or this movie again.
Fair.
But I don't know, I mean, and I haven't seen it since, because when we did Marvel Mania, Eric and I put on a blindfold and listened to it, so I still haven't seen it.
I forgot you guys did that. That's hysterical. You guys did the Bird Box Challenge before anyone did it.
Oh, I didn't even know about that!
You know that movie Bird Box with Sandra Bullock? Where it's basically a quiet place with blindfolds. Everyone was like driving their cars around with blindfolds on and causing terrible accidents. That was the challenge. You're supposed to like go do things you would do everyday life without the ability to see.
But you guys did that before that was even popular. You guys were on the cutting edge.
I gotta mention that this was one of my favorite scenes in the theater. I think the Spider-Man, the spiderweb gag is genius. I don't mean gag as in joke. I mean he's gagged right now with a spiderweb. I think it's really smart because we're taking a teenager who is floundering and doesn't know what to do and tends to kind of impulsively answer everything with like quips and just attempts at like managing something but he doesn't know what he's doing. He's forced here to just sit down and listen. And I think I see this as almost like an analogy for like the moment that every or I should say metaphor. It's the moment that every teenager has with their parents, if their parents like care about them, where at some point they finally have to just take it all in and then decide what to do with that information and be humble and realize that they don't have all the answers, they don't have it all figured out. Every kid has this moment with one of their parents. And I think it's so cool that we kind of force him into this, and that it's related to Spider-Man, because everything he's learning as a teenager growing up has something to do with his spider powers.
Well, yeah, and I think that's not just. I think that's a very pertinent observation about this, because I've had that moment in my life, and I'm sure every person has. This is his "with great power comes great responsibility" moment.
Yes,
and I love that in Miles Morales' story, it comes after the tragic death of his family member. Like, it's like Uncle Ben tells Peter this stuff, he doesn't take the lesson to heart, and then Uncle Ben dies. Here, Miles doesn't even have the benefit of having that lesson before his family member dies, and then he gets that advice, and he still gets the good role model in his life to stick around, Yeah,
his uncle doesn't die because of something he does or refuses to do.
Right,
he's there when it happens, but it isn't actually his fault.
Well, his uncle dies because of the poor choices that he made in life, and that is almost kind of like an example to Miles to, like Peter's lesson was to follow the path that Uncle Ben set for him. Miles' uncle is to go the opposite way, yes.
Yeah, that was always what I loved about him in the comics, is that he's the anti-Uncle Ben.
Exactly. I love the addition to the Miles Morales costume in this movie of the red and black hoodie. I think it's an inspired choice. I think it looks so cool.
Yeah, I'm glad that he doesn't just go in there and grab the ultimate costume.
Yeah, and I love that.
It's funny that it's there.
Yeah, and it's also an expression of his individuality as a person, like the spray paint and everything. It's so well. Well,
and it's really smart because the big message it keeps touting up is everyone in some way is Spider-Man, and that's not saying that we aren't also our own person. And so it's taking all these different spider people and making it about individuality. And so it's talking about the ways in which we're the same and the ways in which we're different, and that the ways in which we're different are what give us the choice to do the right thing or the wrong thing.
Exactly. Yes. Everyone has to shoulder the burden of being a responsible, upstanding person, and how we all do that. We all arrive at a different place if we manage to do that, but that doesn't change that, there is something that's common between all of us, even if we are all different people, of course, And
it's always easier to go the wrong way. And yes. I think Miles has that just as much as Peter did.
Just like Yoda says, the dark side is the quick and easy path.
He doesn't. He also doesn't immediately get his powers and decide to go be a superhero.
That's true. Yes.
I mean, he doesn't go wrestle or go on talk shows, but
he's a little less selfish about it at the outset, which is interesting.
That's true. No, he is less selfish.
Like, Peter Parker immediately is like, I'm going to use this to make money. I'm going to be rich and impress girls, like...
has a private elevator entrance from his penthouse to the collider below.
Couldn't count on having an audience.
I love Nicolas Cage's voice in here. It's just hilarious.
Well, and I think in the comics, and this does it too to some degree, the idea, I think it's important that he gets his powers earlier than Peter did. Like, he's a younger kid when it happens.
Yeah.
So like
that's true.
he has to, and I think that's done on purpose, partly for the sake of variety, but also in that like Peter was at an age where like he hadn't fully found himself, but he would have been like closer to that place where like he gets his powers at right around the moment where he's going to have to kind of pick a path for himself. And with Miles, it's more like it happens earlier, so he has to use that to help define himself in the first place. And so it's used more like a puberty metaphor than I think it is for Spider-Man.
Yeah. It definitely is. I mean, there's some of that in the early stuff, but it's the X-Men was kind of the big puberty power metaphor thing, of course.
Right. Yeah.
And I think you're definitely right. I mean, earlier in the film, I think when Miles is like walking around, when he first gets his powers, he's like, "Oh, is this because I just hit puberty?" You know?
Yeah. Yeah, but it happens with Miles in the comics before he hits puberty. I don't think that's the case here. I think he's a little older, but
in the comments, someone with a vulgar name says that I ruin every video I'm in. Thanks, bud.
Yeah, you can ignore that guy. He comes in and says things like that, and then he leaves.
Does he?
Yeah,
That's funny.
usually.
No, I'm not bothered by it. I just think people like that are funny.
Well, here's the thing. It's partly my fault because I encourage things like that by saying things like everyone has feelings except Dan.
Well, I mean, that's just objectively true. That's been proven.
But yeah, I mean, like, obviously both Miles and Peter's respective character arcs, and I'm talking like classic comic book Peter Parker right now, are to some degree about overcoming insecurities. But I think that's kind of more at the forefront with Miles, where like Peter's more of like a cocky kid that needs like that needs to take a step back.
Yeah, I mean, he's at the outset, he's a really shy and not confident person that's given the power to make him confident, and he like kind of.
Right.
He kind of like he overcompensates to the fact that before, like, everyone has wronged him. He's like, he's the kid that's like, I'm gonna show all the bullies who picked on me who's boss now, you know?
Well, you're right. Miles is kind of the opposite of that because he is more sure of himself socially.
Absolutely.
But then, depending on who he's with, right? Because he doesn't know what to do with girls and stuff still.
Right.
And we didn't talk about the whole shoulder touch thing, but I like that a lot. I imagine that came from someone. Like, there are several things like that in this movie where it feels like it's written from someone's personal experience, which is probably why it's so authentic. Like, that came from somebody's background.
Well, and I like that Miles is a little awkward with girls, and the advice that he gets, I think, is from his uncle that's kind of a bad guy, but he also cares about Miles, and his heart's in the right place in that aspect of his life. It's complex and interesting, you know?
We just got a $13, or a $14, super chat from the Day Ghost. Thanks so much for your support, buddy. He says, Dan, did you get your Daredevil costume for graduation and a friend to guide you through it? Also, I'm starting Walt Simonson's Thor tonight.
I have not purchased a Daredevil costume. If I wear a Daredevil costume at graduation, I'm sure that my mother will kill me because I don't even want to go to the graduation ceremony. I'd rather have it mailed to me in the mail. But my family wants to see me graduate, and of course, you know, all the other people close to me are really excited about that.
That's how I always felt about it. They're just so boring.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go, but if I wear a Daredevil costume, I'm sure that for all the people there that are there, you know, that are there, and why I'm there, I don't want to ruin that experience for them. So I probably won't, unfortunately. But I'm really glad you're starting Simonson's Thor tonight because that run is incredible. I'm sure you're going to love it.
Yep, it's brilliant. It's a little wordy. There's some stuff you got to trudge through, but trust us, it's worth it.
So, I am really into the ending fight we have here in terms of the way it's animated and all of the effects and everything. I love the effect they chose for the kind of interdimensional trouble that comes here, all the, like, sharded glass kind of stuff that goes all over the buildings. I think it's so cool looking.
Yeah, it's a really creative way to do that. I will say that this action goes on too long for me.
You think so?
Yeah, it starts to lose me toward the end.
Fair.
There's another complaint I wanted to bring up, and I think maybe we talked about this in the spoiler cast, but I'll mention it anyway.
Oh, sure.
It is too convenient, or not convenient. It feels kind of plot devicey and contrived. Very often when we do the characters from other dimensions or glitching thing. It happens constantly at, like, really opportune moments where, like, the movie will feel the need to do that to remind us that this is part of the stakes, that, like, these characters can't be in this universe for very long, and there aren't any rules to it, so it just happens when we want drama, or when we want someone to be in pain right then, or when we want to remind the audience, this guy's gonna die at some point, and that's a little too easy.
That's true. I hope. Do you think in the future, now that, like, after at the end, because of this, like, machine is destroyed and stuff, we'll do less of that in the sequels, like with, people in other dimensions, like, glitching out and stuff?
Yes, my prediction is they will all get special armbands that allow them to live in our dimension, or whatever dimension they're in, and not glitch out. It's always done with armbands. Star Trek always does it with armbands. Comics do it with It's gonna be an armband.
Watch it be an ankle bracelet just to subvert your expectations.
Just to mix it up, just so it can be a thing that we don't have to see all the time. It's like, no, they're going to want to visualize it. It's going to be an armband. Solar Dragon says that at your graduation you should at least dress up like Matt Murdock with the cane and red sunglasses.
I did that as a Halloween costume one year, so
did you?
I could do that. Yeah.
That's cool.
Never mind.
Yes. That was one of my favorite Halloween costumes. I just wore a suit with a red tie and red sunglasses. Everyone's like, oh, are you, Agent Smith? I was like, no, I am not Agent Smith, you idiots.
Yeah, I mean, that's also a cool costume, but that's not what he's doing. Do you see a wire in my ear? No. So Dan,
Agent Smith doesn't wear red sunglasses, does he?
No, he doesn't.
Yeah,
that's why you're right that they're dumb for not knowing that.
Yeah.
Let's just be prudish nerds. They're prudish geeks. They're idiots. They should know that.
We taught him that, right?
I'm just kidding. So anyway, we didn't talk about the scene earlier. We just talked over it where they go to the party and they're able to just blend in because it's Spider-Man themed. I think that's really funny.
Yeah.
I like that scene a lot, and I like the whole thing with bread. I think it's great. And I like that he just gets dumbfounded. The thing, we mess that up a lot in interdimensional things, where, like, people will, where a character, just kind of for the sake of drama, will, like, forget too easily that the character they love in another universe is not the character that, or is not the person that they loved, and will, like, risk life and limb way too easily to, like, save them or whatever. Sometimes that bugs me. In this, when he like, just comes face to face with Mary Jane, and he's not thinking about that, and the stakes aren't that high, I totally get it, and I like it. I think it's very funny.
I love you all.
I love how Spider-Man Noir. We forgot to mention it, but the Rubik's Cube joke is one of my favorite things in the movie.
And it works, and, like, Rubik's Cubes get made fun of a lot in movies. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's Rubik's Cube jokes in everything. And,
really?
Yeah, and, like, it's almost a cliche at this point, and it should bug me, but it doesn't. It's funny. I like it because he's black and white, and he doesn't understand colors. And that's why it's great. And when you see him in his universe later on, he's in the black and white world, but he's holding this colored thing, and it's still colored, and it's great. It's great. Can I complain about the title? Because I always like to complain about titles.
Yes.
Can I do it? Can I do it?
Yes.
Well, no one... Okay, so our other characters that aren't Miles, I guess, go to his universe, so it's like Into the Spider-Verse, but, like, you'd think that title we'd be, like, gallivanting around the multiverse, like Into the Spider-Verse. We're gonna, like, leave our universe and go to other universes, but we don't! So it should just be, so, like, I don't know what you'd call it, but, like, it doesn't actually fit!
See, I interpret it as Miles being inducted into the Spider-Verse by being bit by the spider.
Okay. Sure.
That's how I read it, but you might be right.
Yeah.
I mean, the movie doesn't say either way.
I'm just nitpicking. It's not.
Yeah, me too.
I just think it's funny to complain about. It's like, well, if he doesn't go into, I guess I went into the Spider-Verse. It's the same thing as, like, Batman Returns. It's like, well, the movie came back. Like, a movie came back. You know, we went into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, I mean, and then the weird thing is, like, titles like Batman Forever, too, because it's like one movie later, the franchise will die until 2005.
Well, that's true, but that was at least thematically relevant to the movie that he was making, where he was thinking about quitting being Batman, and then at the end he decides he'll never do that. It doesn't really matter if there's more movies in the franchise, it fit for the film they made.
True.
No, I'll stand by that title forever. Forever.
Stand by the title.
I like this. I like the whole Peter and Miles fighting for who's going to try to stop this, and Peter trying to make the epic sacrifice, but it's actually not necessary.
No, you be responsible. No, you be responsible.
That's fun. I like that. He ends up being really likable, and I'm gonna go here and I'm surprised you haven't yet, but he is kind of Fat Thor done right.
Yeah, he is. You're right.
Can I say that? Like, because you didn't complain about it here, where it's like, oh, you got all this comedy mileage out of Peter Parker, like, not taking care of himself. Because, yeah, they do a little bit of that, but it's not just a joke. And, like, I don't think Thor in Endgame is just a joke, but it verges on just a joke.
Oh, no, Thor in Endgame is the worst thing of all time. I guess it didn't bother me here because Spider-Man being a sad sack loser down on his luck is kind of like a quintessential aspect of the character, and he is, by his nature, a sarcastic, jokey character. So doing comedy with him is fine with me. Thor is supposed to be a character that's like... I mean, they do comedic stuff with him in the comics sometimes. Like, Simonson's Thor has comedy all over it related to Thor. But...
he turns into a frog!
Yeah, making him a fat loser... who's just a complete idiot, and it's basically just Chris Hemsworth playing himself as a fat guy. Like, that's not Thor. Like, it's a different character, you know?
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to open this up so we could just bash Fat Thor, but I had that thought.
You're opening up my wounds.
I had that thought, and I just had to throw it out there that
you're right, though.
This is that done more thoughtfully.
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's... like I said before, like, they're not betraying the essence of who these characters are in changing things about them.
So
Fat Thor is changing the essence of who Thor is as a character.
Yeah. So, looking at this action here, I like how surreal all this is. That, like, the multiverse is kind of falling apart, or they're in sort of limbo with it, and you have all these weird colors and things. And, oh, look, it's the intro to the Daredevil show!
Oh, and it's the bridge that Gwen Stacy gets thrown off with as well.
It's that too, but mine was a joke. But anyway, my issue with this is where the action starts to go too long for me, but also, it's a little bit too easy that his father is like the only other person in the scene, that he's just like standing off to the side, no matter where they are, as surreal as this gets, he can always find them. But fair. No one else is there?
Yeah, it definitely works for the thematic stuff, but plot-wise it is a little contrived, I agree.
It's hard to buy. It feels a little Disney. There are very few things in this movie that I would say feel too Disney, but that's one of them. The Disney thing to do would have been to find out that the Ponderer was okay at the end.
I think it's interesting also, and ironic, that we're criticizing a Marvel movie for being too Disney, and the era we live in now, where Disney just owns everything, including Marvel. And this is ironically not, like, it's a Marvel thing, but it's not Disney. I don't know.
Yeah, Disney's actually not involved in this at all. Isn't it also interesting to note that, like, and I gotta give Sony a little bit of credit for this, I guess, that if it weren't for them finally playing ball with Marvel, this movie doesn't happen.
Yeah, which is super interesting, right?
Yeah, they would never have thought to go animated, because they're like, well, the only way we can really do solo Spider-Man movies right now is to go animated, even though there's been all those rumors that Spider-Man is apparently supposed to actually show up in the Venomverse, and I don't understand that yet, but anyway...
Teenage Spider-Man with adult Eddie Brock as Venom, not connected to Spider-Man, is literally the most uninteresting status quo you could start with for those characters. Okay. Literally the most uninteresting.
Okay, you would have been right before I saw the Tom Hardy Venom movie. But the sentence you just described with the visuals in my head sounds fascinating!
Yeah, and Tom Hardy's performance interacting with Tom, like his off-the-wall crazy I don't know what he's even doing in some scenes. Performance would be kind of cool to play off.
Yeah,
Tom Holland.
no, I want to see that. The story of two Toms. I want to see that.
A Tale of Two Toms.
Cinematography
That'll
says,
be the third
hey.
Spider-Man movie.
That
Tale
was
of Two Toms.
the Hay thing is one of the payoffs that I didn't really need. Like, it doesn't really have anything to do with anything. That he does the shoulder touch thing with Kingpin. Like, it's just calling back to a thing that happened earlier in the movie. But what does it have to do with that thing? At all.
I'm still thinking about that Disney comparison you made, and I'm trying to think, like, this is a better animated movie than I've seen from anything Disney's put out in a long while that I've seen. I mean,
and it's close to Pixar quality. It's close to early Pixar quality.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm biased because I'm a Spider-Man fanatic and really love this movie, but like I would put this up there among the Pixar movies in terms of.
Well, again, man, I'm only comparing them because they're animated. This script, for the most part, besides the few straight up, like cartoony things that we brought up, like Alfred Aunt May, most of this script could have been for a live action movie, but it wouldn't have translated as well to live action because, and that's the really nice thing about how they handle the animation in this is they know what their scope can be because they can just draw it. So it can go more ambitious, but it doesn't lose the story over doing that. I also don't know that a animated superhero movie like this happens without as much sophisticated live action as we've had. Because it's
I agree.
Because it's looking at a lot of that and building on that, and that's really nice. I just wish I want this to go a long way toward making animation more appreciated and justified as a thing for adults to go see in this country. And I don't know if it's going to do it, but I hope so. Because I'm telling you, I don't need one more live-action superhero movie after this movie. I really don't.
I mean, the beautiful thing about animation is that you can translate almost anything from a comic book because, like a comic book, your budget is only restricted by your imagination. Like, of course, some things may take more time to animate or whatever, but like you don't have to like build physical sets and costumes, and like your imagination is your canvas. That's the only limit you have. And I think animation is actually much more conducive to adapting the kinds of stories that I love from the comic books
than
live action is,
Yeah, and the thing you have to be careful about is just not to run away with yourself so much that you lose the characters and that the story is nonsense. Like, here's a good for instance, and I can't believe we're only now bringing this up at the end of the film, but we don't need any kind of an excuse for the eyes on the mask to move around in animation. Nobody's asking that question.
No.
I would argue that in something as, air quotes, grounded as the MCU, you did need it if you were going to do it with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. And I appreciated the fact that they came up with some kind of story reason to do that, but you didn't need it with Deadpool because it's a sillier, more over-the-top thing. And I appreciated that Deadpool just did it and didn't talk about it. But in animation, it doesn't matter how serious the material is, you can do it.
Exactly. I agree. And seeing movies like this makes me want a interconnected universe. Like, I wish like DC would just scrap all of their live action plans and just do this as a universe.
Yeah, me too.
Like do like a DCAU 2.
Yeah, and there's something about it being animated and not having to worry about budget and stuff so much that makes me less like impatient. There it is. There's the Rubik's Cube. Makes me feel less impatient about making it all about a shared universe.
Mm-hmm.
Where like in animation, like right away you kind of just want that. Like, I mean, you don't have to have that. I'm just saying that like it's easy. I guess it's easier to do.
Well, and one of my criticisms of the MCU is it rides so much on the novelty of being able to connect to these characters because that's not something we've ever seen in live action before, and they feel like, oh, the story is not as important as doing the big crossover scenes and all of that, Like with animation, we've already seen all these things, so it's not, they can't bank on that novelty. They just have to tell great stories to get people in the theater,
So that line right at the end of this, I'm still really impressed with this movie for managing that, where it's all about how you could. There's all these other Spider-Mans, and I'm not the only Spider-Man, and yet he's a real distinct character, and
Yes.
it was his story. I think that's just absolutely wonderful. We also had that line where he says, not just anyone can wear the mask, but you could be Spider-Man, and I'm like, well, if you get bit by a spider, like, you can't, really. I think what it's, and a lot of things do this, it's trying to say the inverse of what it's actually saying. Spider-Man could be you, but you can't be Spider. You see what I'm saying? So I'm complaining about semantics, but that doesn't actually make sense.
Yeah, I also like that we bookend the movie with the song that Miles is listening to at the very beginning, with at the end there too. I think that was cool.
Yeah, I like that we end on his face and not on Spider-Man's face.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's
what's
important.
important. The humanity in the character, not the mask.
It's about the person, yeah. And I don't know if that we're really saying anything with bookending it with, he was like trying to remember the words and now he's just comfortably listening to the song without singing it, but maybe there's something there.
Maybe.
I don't know, I haven't tried to read that yet, but that's, I don't know, that's a thing, maybe.
I really hope we get a Spider-Man Noir Nicolas Cage movie. That would be so amazing.
Well, here's the thing that's really cool about it. And again, we didn't talk a whole lot about the supporting Spider-Man characters, which I think fuels my point that we don't really get to do enough with them. There's not one of those characters that I don't think couldn't necessarily carry their own film. I mean, like Spider-Ham could be kind of irritating for a full hour and a half, but like there's at least a short film to be made there. Like I think all of those characters you could do something with.
I think the way they should treat it is if they keep making movies in this universe, do Warner Brothers style Looney Tune cartoons with Spider-Ham at the beginning of every movie.
Say that again.
I think what they should do is, if they do continue with the spin-offs and sequels to these movies, do a Spider-Ham Looney Tunes style intro cartoon like the Warner Brothers movies used to have.
You're not the first person I've heard say that, or maybe you are and you're the person I heard say that, but I think that's a really good idea.
I don't know if I was or not, but
you either said that in the spoiler cast or I've heard somebody else say that, but I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. And I think the Spider-Man Noir Nicolas Cage thing is kind of likely, because he's a huge comic book fan. Like, he would totally be up for that.
Yeah, I think it's really cool how much voiceover work he's been doing lately.
Yeah. He was in that caveman movie called The Croods a number of years ago, I remember.
Was he? But, like, he's been doing this kind of stuff. He was Superman in Teen Titans Go to the movies.
Was he really?
Yeah. And that was funny. So this was really classy. If memory serves, this is the first movie that comes out after he dies, yeah?
I think so, yeah. And I love that we thank Stan and Steve Ditko here. Can't forget about Ditko. He's such an important contribution to this character. And so many of the early stories Stan Lee didn't even plot. He just put the dialogue in. Like, people sleep on Steve Ditko as one of the most important talents at Marvel. Everyone knows about Jack Kirby, and rightfully so. Jack Kirby's a genius, but Ditko is also up there.
Well, and I also don't think they had done any kind of a tribute or credit to him yet, because he died the same year.
Wait, what? Sorry?
Ditko had also just died that year.
Oh, yes, you're right, yes.
So that's, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's nice that they do that, but that tribute is specifically both of them because they both died within months apart, or months apart from each other, and I don't think any of the movies had done a credit to him like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was, like, credits in the other Spider-Man movies, like Spider-Man created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, if I remember correctly, but a classy tribute to Ditko like that I haven't seen in anything, which was, I loved. It was very nice.
Soul Dragon says he's talking about Nicolas Cage. He's the last person I'd have thought of for Spider-Man Noir, and yet I could totally see him playing that character seriously. Yeah, it's interesting that, I don't know, is it just being a comic relief character, or that it's so over the top? Like, sometimes when a really famous person does a voice like that, I kind of roll my eyes, because I'm like, I'm just thinking about that person the whole movie. But, like, yeah. Nicolas Cage was kind of perfect, and I don't know if he would have been if it was a more serious character.
Yeah, because Nicolas Cage is a goofball. Like,
Yeah.
his performances are so crazy that you can't help but laugh at them sometimes.
That's not to
And
say that he can't
Spider-Man-
do really serious, stuff.
Agreed.
But
Agreed. But that's kind of what Nicolas Cage's reputation has become over the years, and I just think it's so awesome that they like cast him as a character that plays into that. Like, Spider-Man Noir is kind of crazy.
oh yeah,
You know?
no, he's an insane person. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Nicolas Cage can tap into the same thing he did with Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance. And,
Exactly. It's so funny.
yeah. I mean, he has to be more reserved than that, because he doesn't get to go knocking at the door! He doesn't get to do that crazy thing.
Oh my
But
god,
no, I
love
would-
that movie.
Here's the question, though. Could Nicolas Cage, do you think... I mean, I think he could, but, like... Do you think he could do that character in a more direct adaptation of that material? And do you think they would ever make that?
I really hope so.
I know, but I think that's wishful thinking, right? Like,
Yeah, probably.
after this, I feel like if they made that movie, it might be a little bit more serious and it might have a real character arc, but he's still going to be played for comedy.
Yeah. Which, I don't know. I'm not. I mean, I really like those comics. I don't know if love is a strong enough word. I really like the Spider-Man Noir comics, but I could see them improving on them, just like we kind of did with Miles in this movie, like adding more personal dimension to the character and all that. I mean, I guess it would all depend on how it was done,
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about what you said about improving on Miles, because I have heard the complaint that he is that one of the things that's kind of nice about Miles in the comics is that he's not really street like he is in this, and like that didn't really bother me much, but I think that was kind of refreshing to people, where like he's a black character, but he doesn't have to feel like a street guy. And this movie kind of goes more to that place, but like I don't know, I think there's a good balance.
Yeah, I mean, he's still a very intelligent kid who made it into this like very prestigious school. I think
And like that's the world he grew up in.
I think the kind of him being split between two worlds, like, it is sort of a reflection of like Spider-Man living two different lives, and the Spider-Man is a character that's all about duality. I kind of liked that as an addition, where he's like, oh, like I like the urban artwork that my in the street level stuff that my uncle has shown me, but I'm also a very smart kid, and because I come from a great family and they really encourage me.
Oh, and you know what else I didn't have? That's his version of photography.
Hello?
Danny there?
Yeah, the rabbit room and your speech cut out for a second there.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
I never thought about this before. That's the graffiti thing?
You froze up again.
Oh, okay.
You froze up again, sorry.
I'll make this point eventually.
I can hear you now, yes.
The graffiti thing for Miles is his version of photography.
Oh yeah, it is. I didn't even think about that. You're absolutely right.
I was really excited about saying that, but then I had to say it 4 times.
Imagine, like, Jameson in Miles' universe is a greedy art dealer. That would be amazing.
That would be really funny. And he's like, bring me a $3,000 picture of Spider-Man
I want a spray-painted mural of Spider-Man.
on the overpass. Oh, that's so funny. So Chris Pine records this Christmas album, or this Christmas song, and I think there's a full album of like 5 or 6 tracks.
Really?
Yeah, he recorded more stuff for this. I think it's really funny.
It's so infectious, like, all the people involved with this film, how excited they were to work on Spider-Man. It's so cool. Like, if Chris Pine wasn't excited to be in this movie, he wouldn't have recorded a 5-track Christmas album as Spider-Man,
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And it's cool that he finally got to voice like a main superhero, because he's in Wonder Woman and he's a great character, but like he should get to be a superhero at some point.
I agree. I'm kind of surprised that hasn't happened yet. I
think this also proves that Chris Pine has really good comedic sensibilities, and well, I mean, like, you know, we saw that in the '09 Star Trek movie. I mean, he's very funny in that, whether you like the slapstick in that movie or not. But he, I think some of that is improvised, and I think he's probably a good improv comedian.
I agree.
So I got really excited about this, and then we had to go to the '60s Spider-Man cartoon, and like it's funny and all, but I wanted to see more of this world.
Yeah, I do have I heard a funny story about this. I was listening to interviews. I forget who it was with, but I've been doing a bunch of research for a project I've been working on with comic creators and stuff, and they were talking about...
Dan, it looks so good! It looks so good.
It does look good. They were talking about the Marvel staff was invited to go see this movie, and they all saw it together, and when this happened, there was just a lone cry of, "Yeah!" from Peter David in the background. Everyone was... And, like, Peter David was so excited when he saw this.
That's awesome. Well, there was... I mean, here's the thing. Nothing against Peter David, but, like, I expected Spider-Man 2099 to be the after-credit scene, but I was not any less excited that it was there. I just figured, like, that was... I mean, that was the one major character in Spider-Verse they didn't use. And I heard a lot of fans talking before that where they're like, how come he's not there? And people, like, up in arms about it, like, angry that he wasn't there. And I was like, well, let's wait and see what story they told. And then I stand by that. I don't think you could have... I don't think he made sense in the story they told.
I agree. I'm hoping that he gets his own movie before we see him cross over in the... this is so weird to talk about, because I don't even know what Sony's structure for this is going to be like. If they're just going to do individual movies about all these characters and they won't cross them over for a while, or what, but I hope we get a, like, standalone Spider-Man 2099 movie before we bring him into the Spider-Verse, like, movie where they all cross over and stuff, but I guess we'll see.
But alternatively, I would be really fine if that was one of the properties they decided to make a TV show for, because 2099 on a like 10 or 12 episode basis makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's true too.
Like,
I mean, I'm always for serializing these adaptations of the characters from, you know, comics as much as possible, because that's what the nature of comic book storytelling is. So I'm totally up for a TV show. I'm always up for a TV show rather than movies in general with these characters, though. So
yeah, same here. I just think, and like anything with Spider-Man that makes sense with, but I don't know.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially with 2099, just because of all the, I mean, if you did it straight, because of all of the like intercompany politics and the sci-fi stuff and all of that, to just really flesh out that world.
Oh yeah, and that's how Peter David writes. I mean, like, it's kind of hard to, like, you know, talk about, like, definitive arcs that Peter David's done unless it's like a limited series or something, like the Hulk 2-issue miniseries he did with George Perez, where it's with Maestro in the future and stuff. But yeah, like, you think about Peter David's stories, it's like his run on 2099, his run on Hulk, his runs of Spider-Man, you know, like, he's a serialized long-form guy.
Well, Dan, thanks a lot for watching this with me, man.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I had a blast. This was awesome.
I did too. I was excited that we managed to get through it. And
I know.
We didn't have any more technical problems once we got rolling and you were able to hear it.
I was really worried at first there when I was like, oh, I think I'm going to have to do a non-audio commentary on this one.
Yeah, I was... Well, when another 45 seconds went by and you didn't say anything, I was like, Dan does not want to do this. He does not want to do it like this, and I'm not going to make him.
Well, I was, like, fiddling with the settings, I think. That's why I was not saying anything.
I figured that's what it was, but I wanted to throw you under the bus and make everybody think that you were just not going to talk anymore because you were just so upset about it.
Oh my god, just shaking my fists at the heavens silently.
So mad. Well, guys, we got 1 out of 2 live videos done tonight, and that ain't bad. I'm going to be back on Friday with a brand new episode of the Captain Logan Show, rescheduling that. So look forward to that, folks, and thanks a bunch for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. Dan, come back soon. And Dan and I have plans for comic stuff.
Yes, we do.
And other things.
And I would definitely love to come back to do all these things in the near future, for sure.
All of the things. We were also talking about doing a... we don't have a whole lot of time left, so I don't even know if this is going to happen. We had talked about doing a speculation cast for Far From Home, and
Oh yeah.
that might get away from us. That movie might come out before we have a chance to do that. But if it doesn't, then we might.
Yeah. And I'm sure in typical Sony fashion, we'll know more and more and more and more and more and more about the movie as it gets closer. So
That's true, yeah. Where you're going to have to put earplugs in and turn off all of your devices connected to the internet so that you won't know every frame of the film before you go see it.
yes.
Well, I hope you guys had a good time. We sure did, and we will see you again with more videos later this week on Geekvolution. I'm Captain Logan, and this was Dan Torrey.
Yes, I was Dan. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Good night, folks.
Bye. We did it.
Okay, hold on. Hold on, Dan. We're still broadcasting.
Oh, okay. So I can't start swearing vulgarly.
You can't. Don't do that yet. Okay, bye.